I tell you, go look for patterns. When we look at the word, it said throughout all generations, all that's not in there. It says for your generation. But you got to go back and look up the word generation and see how it's used in context. And typically, when generation means generation beyond a living generation, you'll see the terminology in that for. I just sat there and went through all 133 verses to see that. I want to see there's a pattern. Whenever you want to do something beyond your generation, generation after generation, you put the terminology in there to tell you this is forever, everlasting, generation to generation. You'll see that. But when you do it, you're reading that on the ZZs. It actually says for generation. Now, a lot of people realize that was several generations out there in the wilderness. And we have to look at it in the aspect because what was going on, the guy, you pay attention to what's going on. He said, when you come into the land, I think it says about 2 or 3 times, you should read the whole passage, Numbers 15. When you come to the land. And then right after they said, while in the wilderness. See, most people miss that. Then he talked about the guy that's go out to pick up sticks, right? And he said, what should you do? They said, stone. Because Most High know what was in his heart. And Most High, like, if you need to go pick up sticks and it's cold outside, you didn't get enough on the day before, and you run out because it's real cold, it's okay to go pick up sticks. But he was doing this in spite of. And then right after that, he told them the word is easy, keep running. And you look at the terminology and stuff. And I don't like the way people wear ZZs, because you look at the terminology for it. The word actually means put fringes, tassels on the border of your garment. But the word border, if you don't know Hebrew, you just say, oh man, I need to put a blue thing all the way around me. I need to have the fringes like these all the way around me with the blue coming around like that. If you don't know Hebrew. Now, if you go to Hebrew, you look at the word border, it's actually what is called a dual plural, which means two, like eyes, arms, legs. What it's talking about is I'm looking at something that I have to put ZZs on, the fringes on, made of 2 parts, like wings, 2 wings. So I can't have a garment on with fringes all the way around it and one blue going all the way around the whole garment, because that's not according to the book. So what he's saying is, so I have something on like this. This is what it should look like. This is exactly what it should look like. I got something on 2 parts, front and back. I got the fringes all the way around, and on the end of it, because it said the end tassel. Guess what? It has the purple with the blue in it. This is what it should look like. Not what we see brothers wearing today, a garment with the whole thing around it, because the Hebrew text doesn't support it. And you can get out of the English text, but the Hebrew text does support it. However, now you do see us wearing these, and you see us wearing these. Most everybody got these on. You see us wearing them based on Genesis, Deuteronomy 22:12. Right. And this command will have to give to those that are going to the land. Deuteronomy 22:12. So, and that's why I'm saying that's why it's important that we get into the language, because if not, we find ourselves. That's what I like about the young generation now. If not, we be doing things that doesn't apply to us. Things in the law that apply to women don't apply to me, right?
Hope not.
Right?
I said, I hope not.
You got the question thing now, hey, because, in Georgia, they already started. They started the first LGBT kindergarten and 12th grade school.
Yeah.
And then I think Obama executive order, we have to identify with, whatever gender you identify with.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to that bathroom.
Yeah.
Which might be.
Wired.
Right. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Ron. Now, Everybody know Ron, right?
No, never seen that goddamn
Well, he's a person, you know, typically, you know, when we do a live cast, we get about maybe 200 or 300 views. But when he come in and does the presentation, we like in the thousands. So everybody knows Ron. I refer to him as the Hebrew of Hebrews. I like when he said, you know, typically when he starts the presentation, he tells me he hadn't been to college, but I think he has.
I didn't graduate. I went, I just didn't graduate.
Oh, okay. He said he went, but he didn't graduate. You know, it's amazing. Even though I've been to school, got the degree and all that stuff like that, and seminary and all that, I still learn from him.
And vice versa.
And here's the thing. Here's what I've noticed. You always listen to people, because somebody can teach you something. Somebody can say something and you can pick up it, and it could change everything. You know, we listen to people, but at the same time, this brother here, phenomenal. You know, I sometimes I want to say, well, why he doesn't have his own congregation and stuff, but I understand his role. I consider him to be an evangelist. And who knows, maybe the day you know, we'll see everybody knows him, and maybe the day come where, you know, he go out and evangelize an area and start planting congregations here and there. Not that he would run the congregation or anything, but at the same time, maybe we can have something that come along where we have a training for maybe something like the Hebrew Institute of Theology, where we train people up to become ministers and stuff like that. Learn the languages, learn the history, learn the layout of the book. A lot of people don't know they don't realize, they don't even understand how the book is laid out. Don't understand, you know, let alone textual criticism, but form criticism, the layout of the book, and you know, we need to become better at that. But I'm not going to talk anymore. Like I say, I refer to him as the Master Hebrew or Hebrew of Hebrews. He's like what's that, E.F. Hutton? When he speaks, everybody listens. And I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to let him go ahead and come forward and go ahead and deliver the message. I think it's a timely message because we're in a process. I think all of us should be in the process of trying to unite as Hebrew.
Yes.
From the name, and that's why here we've gone from using the name, we're using Yah to just a 4-letter. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, because that unites. Because I know in the Hebrew community, I think about 10 different names we call the Father, right? And I think with this lecture that he's doing today, the continuation part 2, is we need to unite on the calendar.
Yes, yes.
And I've said this before. We took a survey a couple of years ago and asking when everybody was doing Passover. We found out Hebrew was doing Passover on 21 different days. Now you guys know 21 different days, they all can't be right. So we can come together, and he's done the research. Let me tell you a little bit about this before we come. He's done the research historically, archaeologically. He's done all the research. But here's the strange thing. We've come to the same conclusion on the calendar. I came through just looking at the scriptures, and we talked. It basically came through Revelation. But he's done the work to basically strengthen the revelation that I received on. And it just let me know Yah is good in that how he can disseminate information. He did it for him through one way, but for me another way. But at the same time, he came to the same conclusion. But I'm not going to hold you any longer. I'll go ahead and introduce you to Ron, Divine Prospect, also known as Hebrew of Hebrew, Master Hebrew.
Put that one on. That's good.
Hallelujah.
You got to bring it down a little bit.
There's another one on there.
Don't be afraid of it.
This one is good. I just need it down a little bit. There you go.
Don't be afraid of the light, brother. Step to the light.
But if you got to need some water, feel free to get some in the back.
Nah, I just need it down like this.
Okay, cool.
I don't want it.
You want another light? We have 2 lights.
No, that's perfect. This.
Sounds okay.
think this should be okay. It's a little bright, but I could work through it. Yeah, it's picking up. It's picking up perfect. It's picking up good. It's good.
So you good with this? You good with this?
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, I can write it up.
No, it's good. I just. Yeah.
Hey, if they get out of control, you need to go the wire.
Yeah, I'm not prefer to wine. No, you can keep that. I might need that. Yeah. Looking for that. Okay. All right, that should be good. Yeah, it's good. It's better. All right. Shabbat Shalom, Ms. Rakah.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Minister Carnes, for the warm welcome as always. Very modest, but nonetheless, I appreciate it. And I'm glad to be here at the Hebrew Congregation of Atlanta. Minister Carnes is the overseer and always teaching me something. I was always learning something when he takes the academic approach to deciphering the things that's in the text that we normally took for granted in the past. I want to thank the Most High, Yah, and Yeshua Mashiach, and all the family that's out here that came today. I didn't really advertise the second part. I should have, but I didn't because I wanted to be a little bit more laid back scenario. You know what I'm saying? I don't want nobody to feel like they're on the spot. So that's why I didn't really promote it too much. But what y'all gonna get here firsthand, hopefully, is a treat. Because this type of research, like I mentioned before, hold on, give me 1 second. There we go. Nope, can't hear nothing. Yeah. So it sounds like a slight feedback. Okay, that's better. All right, there we go. All right, cool. So I'm doing part 2 today, and like I said, the research that I put into here, you know, I haven't seen nobody present it the way that I've seen it in here, but I realized that in order for me to present a conclusion, I have to first show people my methodological approach. I think it's still feeding back a little bit. Adjust that a little bit. Frank, go fix it. Come on, Frank. Mr. Fix It Man. Man of all trades. So I'll talk about he's doing that. So I say that to say, according to what Minister Carnes has said earlier, you know, a lot of times you can't just put anything out there because now people will fact check you. People will go back and research. I know recently I put a video out. Well, I didn't put it out. It was a personal conversation. Somebody asked to record it, so I let the brother record it. And I was just throwing information out because I was trying to speak to a brother or several brothers that were considered Tanakh only in regards to the Mashiach, and I was trying to give them a historical, but that's good. That's perfect, yeah. Thanks, Frank. Give Frank a round of applause, everybody. There we go. That's the real Superman right there, Frank. All right. So what I wanted to do was present a case to them that is very Torah-centered and very historical. So I brought out a lot of research and history and so forth that I went through in the past, and I used that data to build a bridge so that way the person can listen to the case in regards to the Mashiach. And the interesting thing about that is that most of the stuff that I said I subscribe to, some things I don't, but I was trying to give them a historical perspective and viewpoint or vantage point in regards to the historical acclamation that people had towards the Mashiach. And in doing so, somebody took the video and they put it in a group with Christians and Hebrews and so forth. And Christians just went mad, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I don't despise my Christian, but I love all my Christian brothers and sisters. And I love talking with them. I love building because it's about love and edification. You know, I'm not here to condemn nobody. I'm not the Most High, you know, but we can talk about facts and data when it comes to research and application of the knowledge that we're learning. So they critiqued it, peer reviewed it a little bit. I gave a little bit of feedback, and the dialogue was pretty healthy, even though there was some extremists that was on there, condemning me to hell and all this other stuff. I thought it was very interesting. But nonetheless, it created or garnered a conversation that people started to look into certain things that they weren't aware of previously, okay? So now that the mic is working and we're gonna get to this lecture, this is part 2. Forgive me, I'm a little bit tired, a little bit exhausted. I had a long night. I was actually hanging out with somebody. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see. I don't want to put it on blast too much, but hanging out, you know, the brother came into the truth officially not too long ago. And he's somebody that's well known in the world. So I was just building with him, and you know, we had a really great build all the way to like almost 4 or 5 in the morning. So it was a really good build. But the Most High got all the glory, and that's the bottom line. All right. So let's get started. So now this is part 2. So for anybody who's here that missed part 1, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go over part 1 because I had to get through at least an hour of information, right? And I don't want to go over, or a little over an hour. I don't want to go over everything that I said in part 1. So you can go back to my YouTube channel, look up Cultural Liberation through Research and Application, part 1. And that one is by Brother Uziyahu and Divine Prospect. Part 2, Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. You can type that in on YouTube and check it out. Second thing, anybody that's here, you can go on my Facebook page right now, share the link for this live stream, because I know people are asking for it. So if you don't mind, you can do it right now. I'll give you about a minute or 2. This is the only time that you're allowed on your phone. After this, please mute your phone. All right. And you can share the link. Now, number 3, I'm going to go over a few things that I did not touch on in depth. And the first part that I think is very important, and then I also added something. Right, and I want to see if anybody picks up what I added. Those who have watched the first part, yes. Yes, it is. Thank you. How's that looking? It's looking okay. The live stream. Minister Carnes, can you see me? Oh, you see my Facebook? Oh man, people's in my business. Hold on. What's that? All right. So yeah. So if anybody could just keep an eye on that, just to make sure that nothing, webcam doesn't fall, anything like that. All right. So let's get started. So I'm gonna go over a couple of things that I think is very important that I didn't. You can turn that light off. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, that's good. So I'm gonna go over a few things from the first half. I ended off on the Babylonian part that dealt with Nabonidus and Nebuchadnezzar, which is very interesting because a lot of people read the Bible. Some of us don't know history. So a lot of us, how many of y'all know who Nabonidus is? Never heard of him? Anybody else? All right. Yes. Always got something good to share with y'all. All right. So that's the part that I stopped at. I'm going to go into that. I'm going to pick up on that, but I got to go through maybe about 5 quick slides real quick that I didn't touch on the first one, but you're going to get a treat. And I want to see if y'all can follow trends. Minister Carnes mentioned that. I mentioned that before when I'm going to show you my methodology. Patterns and trends are very, very important because they're the best way to help you to decipher what you're reading in the text, all right? So let me go through these slides real quick. I went over this. I went over methodology. Go through it. Yes. Somebody say my name? No? Okay. All right, let's go through all of these slides. Go through this, go through all of that. All right. Wait. Oh, man, messed up. All right, hold on. All right, does anybody remember this slide?
Yes.
Okay. What did I add here? Because before it was 5. The what? Weather. Ah, that wasn't there last time, right? So can somebody read what I have up there? What is up there for the heading? What does it say?
6-point system for determining time in ancient Palestine.
There you go. So I thought about it. I said, you know what? How did I miss this? So I went back and I added it because I said, let me touch on it a little bit because this is very, very important in regards to determining time. Very important, okay? So I went over the sun, I went over the moon, the stars, the harvest, and the animal nature. Now let me scroll through and get to the weather, which is the last part, all right? So weather deals with climate changes. Whoops, let's go back. It deals with climate changes, i.e. spring, summer, which is mostly warm, hot, arid, depending upon your elevation, your location. If you're closer to the central countryside, if you're on the coastal plains, if you're going towards the south, then in the Negev desert, if you're going towards the north, towards Galilee, etc. And then in the winter, you have mostly cool, cold weather and rain in Israel. So Israel has an extended winter, and it's approximately 4 months. All right, typically we have a winter for 3 months, their winter is approximately 4 months. All right, and that's very important because these are seasonal rains. And when you see these seasonal rains, it helps you to determine what time it is. New York, we said, what time? You know what time it is? What does that mean in New York slang? Anybody know? Somebody say, you know what time it is? You know, say it again, bro. You know the situation. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so y'all know what. So this is gonna show you what time it is. All right, so let's go through it. I'm gonna go through it. I went through all of this. You remember the sundial?
Yes.
All right. The steps of Ahaz. So next time you read that scripture, Isaiah giving that prophecy to Ahaz, you know exactly what he's referring to in regards to the steps going back. That has to do with a sundial. Very, very interesting stuff. All right. Went through the moon. Elliptic plane. I went through that. Constellations, astrological signs, actual procession. Went through all of that crops. All right. Let's go. All right. Animal nature. This is very interesting. I never heard anybody really talk about that with the calendar. All right. So, all right, weather. Weather as an indicator of measuring time. The rain season, mid-November to about mid-March, which is cool to cold and when the rains occur. Winter in Israel starts with mild showers in late October and advances to periodic heavy rainfall from mid-November to mid-March. How many of y'all has been to Israel here? Raise your hand. And those of y'all who haven't been to Israel, how many of y'all knew about the rain season in Israel? Raise your hand. Okay. And this is very important. And the reason why I say this is because if you look at a chart that documents and gives you the data from ancient times that it was recorded till now, a lot of the ecosystem has changed a lot in the atmosphere and the climate. So this was more prevalent during that time as opposed to now. We have CO2 emissions in the air. We have holes in the ozone layer. We have factories and all that type of stuff. So all of that stuff also adversely affects the weather, all right? So the stuff that you see here was more pronounced in the past than what we have today. It was more consistent back then because they didn't have a lot of fossil fuels burning. They didn't have a lot of CO emissions. They didn't have a lot of factories that was affecting the atmosphere, all right? So how to empirically determine this point of reference? Weather forecasting. How many of y'all know what a meteorologist is? You would think a meteorologist is somebody that studies meteors, and that's the initial intent. But really now it has the nomenclature of somebody that actually studies the climate or the atmosphere and is able to forecast or tell you before something happens in regards to the weather. So you observe the atmosphere temperature for climate changes, right? So Leviticus 26:3 says, if you walk in my statutes and keep my commandments so as to carry them out, then I should give you rains in their season, so that the land will yield its produce and the trees of the field will bear their fruit. The real Israelites, or the majority of them, are out of the land today. And being that the land is perpetually unclean now, a lot of this stuff is off. And if you look at the data that I told you earlier, you'll be able to see that because now we're destroying the ecological cycle that's going on in that area. So when the land is unclean, the Most High is saying that because nobody's keeping my statutes, laws, and commandments, I cannot promise you that everything that happened at that time when you're a sovereign, independent of the land is going to be consistent today. That's important. Devarim 11:13 says, it shall come about if you listen obediently to my commandments, which I am commanding you today, to love Yahuwah your Elohim and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, that he will give the rain for your land in its season, the early, like I mentioned earlier, and the latter rain or late rain, that you may gather in your grain and your new wine and oil. Devarim 28:12 says, Yahuwah will open for you his good storehouse, the heavens, to give rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hand. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. Song of Solomon 2:11 says, behold, the winter is past, the rain is gone and over. Same thing that I showed y'all here. Matthew 16:2, but he replied to them, when it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. Look up rain scattering. You'll understand why the sky gets red. Okay, very interesting. And in the morning, there will be a storm today, for the sky is red and threatening. Do you know how to discern the appearance of the sky? So these are people during this period of time, 1st century CE, that were looking at the atmospheric changes and was able to determine whether it was going to rain, whether it was not going to rain, etc. So this goes back to observing the atmosphere temperature to understand and know when these rainy seasons were occurring, okay? Now, this is another element that helps you to pinpoint what season you're in when you're in the land of Israel, or you can take that same principle and apply it where you're at locally, okay? All right, let's move forward. All right, and here's, I'll read a little bit of this for you. I don't want to stay on it too much. Israel has a Mediterranean climate characterized by long, hot, dry summers and short, cool, rainy winters, as modified locally by altitude and latitude. The climate is determined by Israel's location between the subtropical aridity characteristic of Egypt and the subtropical humidity of the eastern Mediterranean area. January is the coldest month with temperatures from 5 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, and August is the hottest month from 18 degrees to 38 degrees Celsius. About 70% of the average rainfall in the country falls between what? November, keep that in mind, and March. June through August are often rainless. Rainfall is unevenly distributed, decreasing sharply as one moves southward. In the extreme south, rainfall averages less than 100 millimeters annually. In the north, average annual rainfall is about 1,100 millimeters. Rainfall varies from season to season and from year to year, particularly in the Negev Desert, which is the south. Precipitation is often concentrated in violent storms causing erosion and causing flooding. All right, so let's move forward. All right. Now, there's a few slides in here I want to address. Let me go through this. I'm gonna just read a paragraph over this real quick. What I had here, I didn't even go through this in part 1, but I left the scriptures up here so when I release the footage, you guys can see and go back and research. But this is to get an understanding of how time was measured and reckoned by the ancient Israelites, which is a little bit different than what we reckon today. And this is very, very important. But when you read these, you'll get examples on how they deemed what the day was, how they deemed what the month was, and how they deemed what the year is. And I just want to read a few notes through that, and then we'll run through it, all right? So this one touches on the day. Now, we have a situation in the scriptures where it says, between the evenings. What was done between the evenings? What was mentioned that was done between the evenings? What event? Passover lamb. Anything else, Minister Carnes? What was done between the evenings? I know you teach this. You taught this before. Between the evenings. So anyway, there's a statement in scriptures called between the evenings. I want you to go back and research that. But if you look at Exodus 12 and 6, Leviticus 23 and 5, Numbers 9, 3, 5, and 11. It's an expression that appears to mean the time between sunset and full night. Some sacrifices also be made between 2 evenings. However, the very fact that the law has to specify that observances and special performances take place in the evening or run from evening to evening suggests that such was not normally the case. If the day began at sundown, then the only necessary information would be the date of the observance, e.g. that the Sabbath is on the 7th day of the week. It would already be understood that such days begin and end in the evening, yet the law makes a point to highlight that such observances must commence in the evening. This evidence actually implies a day that does not usually begin such a time. As the proceeding demonstrates, all the main sources assume a day that begins and ends at sunrise. I'm gonna let you go back and research that. I'm gonna go into this. A question we might ask is a day beginning in the evening an innovation of the priests or something borrowed from another culture, or is it incorporating and preserving an older system? Rituals tend to have long lives, so it is certainly possible that the priests are preserving an ancient practice, but we have no evidence for an evening to evening day in any source older than P. And P has to do with the priestly when you go through the documentary hypothesis. I have a video on my YouTube channel. You can go back and check that out. All right. It says P's liturgical year, as we shall see, and P's festival day begins at different times than in other biblical sources, and they appear to imitate foreign custom. It therefore seems more probable that the liturgical calendar, what does liturgy mean? Liturgy, liturgical, what does that mean? Having to do with worship, priestly stuff. Calendar was based on foreign systems that on an early Israelite one. Now this is their proposition for that. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. The reason why I'm bringing it out is because I want you to go back and research the reckoning of time in regards to the day. That's very, very interesting. All right, let's move forward. Oh, and then we also have here where it talks about the various divisions of the day, which is also important, but I don't want to get too hung up on that. A month, it says, on the other hand, evidence can be cited to demonstrate that months may have been assigned a set number of days regardless of the actual phase of the moon. And the flood narrative of Bereshit, the priestly chronology, informs us that 5 months separated the beginning of the flood and landing on the ark on Mount Ararat, and that this period comprised 150 days. The clear inference is that each month lasted an even 30 days. In a system in which direct observation of the moon determined the length of months, this can never happen. The schematic representation of the months is similar to that found in Daniel chapter 12, 7, and 11, and which 3.5 years is equated to 1,290 days, or 42 months, or precisely 30 days. These figures simply may be idealized round numbers, but even if not, the flood chronology was created by the redactor of the priestly history and cannot therefore be used as evidence of pre-exilic custom. When a calendar is intended to measure the actual length of months, i.e. the course of the moon, rather than create an arbitrary length for convenience, the most useful phenomenon to observe are the moon's phases. A month is the interval of time between two successive observations of the same phenomenon. Very important. All right, it says, since this period fluctuates slightly with no apparent pattern, there would have been little opportunity for prediction. All right, let me read this. The synodic month averages 29.5 days. So in a calendar, a lunar month can only be 29 or 30 days, never more and never less. And that's also important for a month. Year, I'll read this real quick. The Hebrew word for year is what? Shin, Nun, He. Shena, or Shana, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Comes from the root meaning to change or to repeat. The implication is that the year is a revolution of time. Ancient farmers were well aware of changes in seasons, and as such, would have governed their idea of what constituted a year. The annual cycle marked by seasons is assumed in many pre-exilic texts. More exact observation of the movement of the sun revealed the times of the year when the period of daylight and the period of night were equal. The equinoxes on about September 22nd and March 20th, as well as the days when the daylight was shortest, December 21st, and longest, June 21st. The solstices, the length of the tropical year, therefore, was well known among the ancients to be approximately 365 days. Remember what I told you how old was Noah when he got taken up? I'm sorry, Enoch. I said Noah. Enoch. How old was Enoch when he got taken up? 365. Very interesting, all right? So let me get through this. Now, there's something in here I do want to point out. I want to show you guys. All right. So, not the Moedim. Let's go through that. Move past that. The names of the months, we went through that. Do y'all remember the names of the months in Hebrew? Before they went into captivity, it was only 4 months that was named. Now, I want to go over this. The priestly code for monthly observances. Remember, I told you there is a sacerdotal calendar, which means what? Or sacerdotal menology. Sacerdotal means priesthood, priestly, all right? Comes almost from a play on the word sacred, all right? So in a sacerdotal calendar, it was different than the civil calendar, civil menology. Menology means the study of months and how months is recorded, okay? And then you have what's called the regnal menology or the regnal calendar, and that was something that had to do with intervention from the king, from the monarch, all right? So in the priestly code for the monthly observances, which you get in Vayikra chapter 23, there's something important I want to point out here, and I want to see if you guys pick up on the pattern. So it says here, on the 14th day of the first month at twilight. Got that? Got that? Okay. Here it says 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. We got here, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial blowing of trumpets. It says here, the Day of Atonement, verse 27, and the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Then we go here, the Tabernacle says the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, for 7 days. It goes on here and says again in verse 39, also on the 15th day of the 7th month. 15th day of the 7th month. We also have the first day of the 7th month. We also have the 14th day, and then we have the 15th day. It's interesting. It's interesting because the priests were responsible for ensuring that this time, this reckoning of time, was being counted appropriately to ensure alignment with the feast days, the festivals, the agricultural cycle, and what's going on in the heavens. All right? Now I'm going to move past that. Went through this already. Keep pointing the wrong way. I went through that. The word crescent is not used as far as the moon is concerned. All right, let me take this back. It's good. Lunar reckoning at the Exodus. This is what I want to deal with. The full moon. Now, when the Israelites was leaving out, was the moon a crescent? Was it a dark moon? Was it a full moon? Was it a gibbous? What phase was the moon in before the Israelites left? Because this will help you determine how time started as far as the count in regards to months. See, I don't know a lot of people that touch on this, but I'm going to show you something. Let's see if you pick it up. Shemot chapter 10, verse 22. So Moshe stretched out his hand towards the sky, and total darkness covered Mizraim for 3 days. No one could see anyone else or move about for 3 days. Yet all the Israelites had light in the places where they lived. Now remember, the Israelites was in a different section of Mizraim or Egypt than the regular Egyptians, or where Pharaoh or the Nisut or the Pharaoh was. This is important. Now, can you have total darkness in the evening if you have a dark moon?
No.
Say it again.
No.
Let me say this again. Can you have total darkness in the evening if you have a dark moon? Of course not, because the moon's already dark. It's already dark, so that would have been a sign. So, okay, the moon is already dark, so it ain't a big deal. But if the moon was supposed to be full and you have darkness, now we got a problem. Something going on here. How many of y'all noticed that before in the scripture? Raise your hand. It's deep. Now look at this. Shemot chapter 12, verse 1. Now look, we're in chapter 10, and we're creeping to verse 12. And then it says, now Yahuwah said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mizraim, this month shall be the beginning of month. The word here is Chodesh, which means the renewing. This renewing shall be the beginning of renewals for you. It is to be the first renewal, Chodesh, of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying on the 10th of this month. Now slow down. At this point, we're not on the 10th day. There was an indicator that started the renewal process. So we see a situation where we had to have a full gibbous in the sky in order for the darkness to cover the moon, in order for it to be a sign to Pharaoh, Nisut, and the Egyptians that the Most High is the highest Elohim. He's not going to do it when the moon is dark. He'll do it when the moon is full. And as the cycle is getting towards the full moon, now it's like, this is the first of the month. This first of the renewal of the Chodesh. Interesting. Interesting. Because if it was a dark moon, it would be waning. It would be waning. And the darkness wouldn't mean nothing. It wouldn't be a big deal. Are you following me?
Yes. Yes.
Did you ever look at it this way, Minister Carl, before? Interesting, right? Interesting, right? All right. The significance is in order for there to be total darkness at night, the moon had to be waxing in the gibbous stage close to a full moon. After the plague had subsided, chapter 10, days later, the Most High told Moshe in chapter 12 that at that point, the renewing cycle, or the Chodesh that started, would be the beginning of renewing cycles, Chodesh, or the first renewing cycle month, Chodesh. This implies that the monthly count started at the full moon. Okay. I went over this. I'm not going to go over that. Let's get past that. All right. Now, I want to deal with something in the civil menology. Remember I read for you Vayikra chapter 23, right? Okay. I want you to see if y'all pick this out. Well, actually, let me read this before I get to that. This is a note regarding the full moon reckoning interpretation of the Giza calendar. Sources, Calendrical Variations, the Second Temple Judaism by Stephanie Saulnier, right? Which is a great source. It says, there may be evidence supporting the hypothesis of a lunar reckoning starting the month at what? Some argue that the Giza calendar, an archaic calendar in use in Canaan around the First Temple period, started the month at the full moon. And we know that because the word for month that's used in the Giza calendar is what? Yerach. Yerach. That's important. The note here says, note 5 on the Giza calendar. Additionally, talking about a book that was written by somebody named Hayutin. Role of the solar and lunar calendar suggests that this calendar was based on the archaic calendar in use in Canaan before David's reign. For an outright translation of the plates and a short discussion of the Giza calendar. This is the note. When we go to the note 109, it says, according to Chayuntin, this calendar testifies to the existence of a very old way of reckoning the start of the month at full moon. The two passages suggested by Chayuntin are interesting for our purpose. The first describes the cycle in terms of waxing and waning. On the waxing and waning month after month forever. Conversely, the second mentions the waning first, the waning of the month of Ethnanim with the waxing the month of Ethnanim. Chayutin reckons the first part of the passage referred to the second part of the month. Now, this right here may sound a little obscure, but when I get to the latter part of the presentation, you'll see that this is making a reference to what we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's very interesting because a lot of people use the Enochian calendar, and I just want to bring some light to that. So it says, while the second part of the passage points to the first part of the month, the waxing from crescent to full moon. Thus, both passages can be interpreted as synonymous in describing the rhythm of the cosmos. If this interpretation is plausible, the second passage can simply be interpreted as a description of the month of Ethnanim from full moon to full moon. You're going to see why that is important. It says, in favor of such interpretation is the fact that the custom in Canaan appears to have been to reckon the month from the full moon, an element recognized by Chayuntin. If this is correct, we would have in these texts two different ways of reckoning the lunar months as early as the 10th century BCE in Canaan. So it's very interesting that the full moon was an element that was used to help to determine the monthly cycles. Full moon, very important. Now, when we go to the civil code, remember the sacerdotal menology was given to the priesthood in order for them to determine times, seasons, etc. But their calendar will be loosely called calendar. Remember, I told you the word calendar is not in the Hebrew. Their method of reckoning time and how they determined it was much different. Their season started when? When did the sacerdotal menology or calendar start? What time of the year did it start? Spring. The civil code for the regular layman, when did their season start? I said this before. Say again, who said that? Fall, late summer, fall. And we go to the Giza calendar, we see it starts with the olive harvest, which is towards the late summer going into the fall. Very important. And remember, I told you guys when during the Day of Atonement on the 7th year, we have what? What happens every 7 years? And what else? Jubilee, Yobel, right? For the citizens, right? So it happens, interestingly enough, during Yom Kippur, during the fall period when the civil calendar is in effect, because it was something that was granted to the layman. The priest wouldn't have kids because everybody takes care of the priest. But the layman will be conserved, and that's why the Most High set it up so that way we have a Yobel, Jubilee, during the fall, during the start of the calendar season for the layman. You follow me? Okay. Now, what don't you notice here in the civil code? Remember, this code was for the layman. Then we have the sacerdotal menology, what I read in Leviticus chapter 23, that was for the priesthood. Now, I'm gonna read this a little bit and tell me what's missing that we don't see here that we see in the Vayikra chapter 23 or the sacerdotal menology. It says, observe the month of Abib. Then it says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Then it says 7 days, it says, and no leaven shall be seen among you in all your territory for 7 days. Then it goes over to say that there you shall sacrifice Passover at twilight. Verse 8 says, 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a sacred assembly to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not do no work in it. This is Deuteronomy or Devarim chapter 16, verse 1, going to verse 8. Now, what don't we see here that we saw in Vayikra or Leviticus chapter 23? It just says, observe the month of Abib. That's it. Then it says, you shall eat unleavened bread for 7 days. What's missing that we see in Vayikra chapter 23? You there? The what? Somebody get Leviticus chapter 23. I just read it. This is really good. And how? Yeah. The time. When does Passover start? What day of the month does it start? 14th. We don't see it here. But in Leviticus, you see it there. Right. Because it was the priest's job to count the days. And when they made the proclamation, It was the responsibility of the layman to come and respond to the call of the convocation. Interesting. That's why you don't see 14th day here, but you see it in Leviticus chapter 23. There's a different system here for the civil people than it is for the priesthood. Just like, again, in our society, we have a school year. You know, in our society, we have a fiscal year, we have a calendar year, we have all different types of years, but it only applies to certain people, certain trades, certain industries, etc. So the farmer's almanac is not going to bother a businessman who's running a corporation. Unless the corporation depends upon agriculture. There's two different systems there, right? But there's certain things that will happen to keep things synchronized. Okay, so we keep reading. It says, for the Feast of Weeks, 7 weeks, you shall begin to count 7 weeks. And it says, when you put the sickle to the grain, this is very, very important, but I'm not going to touch on it right now. Again, the Feast of Tabernacles, you shall observe the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days. And you shall rejoice in your feast, Hag, it's important, and you and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, and the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, etc. Verse 15 says, 7 days you shall keep a sacred feast, Hageg, which is different. This has to do with a pilgrimage feast when you have to move somewhere. As we keep reading, it says to Adonai your Elohim or Yahuwah your Elohim in the place which Adonai chooses, because Yahuwah your Elohim will bless you in all your produce and in the work of your hands, so that you should surely rejoice. And verse 16 says, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before Yahuwah your Elohim. Now this wouldn't matter to the priest, because the priest is already working the temple. They didn't have to travel really much. I mean, when they left the temple, people had to take them in, take care of them. But for the people, they had to know, listen, when these time periods come, you need to commute, you need to travel to have these feasts. Certain feasts you could do locally, like Shabbat and a couple other feasts, trumpets, etc. But these 3, you have to move, and you have to do a pilgrimage feast. That's why when we look at Pentecost, what does Pentecost mean in Hebrew? It's a Greek word, but what is the equivalent in Hebrew? Shavuot. You know, you hear a lot of times Christians talk about Pentecost, and they only attribute Pentecost to when the Ruach HaKodesh fell on the apostles and they distributed this message about Yeshua HaMashiach. But they don't tell you that Pentecost just means Shavuot. That was also the period of time that is reckoned when Moses brought the law to the people at Shavuot. This is very important. Now, again, for tabernacles, what time period during this month, 7th month, are you supposed to have tabernacles? 4, but how many days? When you do a count. No, when you do a count. 15. Why we don't see it here? It don't say it. It wasn't the layman's job to determine that. It was the priest's job to determine that. And then once they determined that, they made the proclamation for the layman to come and respond. Interesting. See, if you don't know there's several calendars intertwined, you're going to miss this. All right? I went over this, the Jubilee. Now, the Regno Menology, I want to touch on something in here real quick. May have used lunar reckoning up until the 8th month. May have used lunar reckoning up until the 8th month, all right? Let me go into that, because y'all like, what are you talking about? Before I do that, I'm going to show you something. The renewing cycle feast sacrifice in 1 Samuel. Now, we have a situation, it's a very interesting situation, 1 Samuel chapter 11, 14. It says, then Samuel said to the people, come and let us go to Gilgal and renew, Hadash, the kingdom there. Sometimes this is placed as restore. So Hadash is a root word for what? Hodesh. Hodesh means what in Hebrew? Renewing, but colloquially it's month. But that just means to restore or to renew. And then they added a connotation to that to mean month. Connotation is when you attribute a definition to a word that's already in existence, that previously had another definition or another means of understanding, depending upon the culture. Now, I say that because I want to build a foundation so you understand that Hadash, which is the root of Hodesh, does not literally mean month. We think that way because when the translators translated, they had to do it in a method that we can understand modern times. But back then, they do it as a restoring something that was lost, that's being restored. Something that's lost, that's being restored. Think about the phases of the moon. That's interesting. 1 Samuel 20:18 says, then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon. So he's speaking to David. Tomorrow is the new moon. No. Tomorrow is the renewing but this is how they have it translated, new moon. It should be Hodesh. Tomorrow's a renewing, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty, so that weed hid in the field, and when the renewing came, the king sat down to eat his food. What king is this in reference to? Saul. The king sat on his seat as usual, the seat by the wall. Then Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not speak anything for that day, for he thought, it is an accident. He is unclean. Surely he is not clean, because if you're unclean, you cannot participate in this stuff.
Right.
Just like we know the second Passover and the second month can happen when you're unclean. Okay, but it's interesting. It came about the next day, the second day of the renewing, Hodesh, that David's place was empty. So Saul said to Jonathan, his son, why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal either yesterday or today? Jonathan said, then answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem, for he said, please let me go, since our family has a sacrifice. Now, a renewal period happened, a feast occurred. If you were unclean, you couldn't participate. It was for more than 2 days, and a sacrifice was made in the city. Interesting. The precept, if we go to Bamidbar, Numbers 10 and 10, it says, also in the day of your gladness and in your appointed feast, the Moed, and on the first days of your months, Hodesh, you shall blow the trumpet over your burnt offering, sacrifice, burnt offerings. Right? When the renewing came, or the gathering time came, during the first of your months, this is what you did. And offer the sacrifices of your peace offerings, and they shall be a reminder of you before Elohim. I am Yahuwah your Elohim. Bamidbar 20:11 says, then at the beginning of each of your months, you shall present a burnt offering to Yahuwah, 2 bulls and 1 ram, 7 male lambs 1 year without defect, and 1 male goat for a sin offering to Yahuwah. It shall be offered with its drink offering in addition to the continual burnt offering. Why is that important? Because this gives you the backdrop of what's occurring here. But the interesting thing is, even though this was the starting cycle of a new month, they also had a feast that was tied to that. And a sacrifice had to be given as well, according to these precepts here. That's interesting, because we only see this being played out here. A lot of things we see in Torah is played out somewhere in the Tanakh, for the most part. So in order to understand what's going on here, because sometimes you may misinterpret this to be another feast, or one of the important feasts, but not know what goes on during the renewal stage. These are certain things that have to take place as well. Okay, Khan? Let's move forward.
That's right.
All right. Lunar reckoning and the time of silence. I want you to pay attention to this. It's very important. I didn't even do the animation to this, but 1 Kings 6:37 says, let me see if y'all catch it. In the fourth year, the foundation of the house or the Beit Yahuwah was laid, or the Most High was laid, in the month Yerach of Ziv. Yerach. In the month Yerach. So this word is used for month. In the 11th year, in the month Yerach of Bull, which is the 8th month. But that word month is Hodesh. But in English, we only see the word month and month. But we don't see what's going on behind the scenes, because a lot of times we don't do word study. I don't know if you realize how deep this is, but when you sit back and look at it, month, Yerach, then month again as Hodesh. Well, why are they interchanging 2 different words and calling it month? Unless there's an indicator there that we're missing. The house was finished throughout all its parts and according to all its plans, so he was 7 years in building it. 1 Kings 8:2 says this. It says, all the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast, Hag, in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th Hodesh. Now, H3391 is Yerach. And the Yerach and Ethanim, which is the 7th Hodesh, and the Yerach. Now, Yerach is related to what root word in Hebrew? What's the word for moon in Hebrew? Yeriach. Yerach is a derivative of Yeriach. So the lunar reckoning was used to determine the renewing of Ethanim in Bull. Okay. You'll probably get this when I move forward. This is good stuff. Is it good, Mr. Carl? You like it? It's good? It's good? Okay. I need an amen corner somewhere, you know what I mean? All right. So look, this is good because a lot of times if you don't see this in the Hebrew, you'll assume that it's using the same word. But Yerach is a reckoning. This is the same word that we find in the Gezer calendar. that they're using something that has to do with the moon connected to the renewal cycle, which we would colloquially call month. So the moon, at least for Bull and Ethanim, has to be used to understand when renewal cycles are happening to count time. What'd you say? Somebody said something?
I just had a question, and that's in between month 7 and month 8. Is that why the fall? That's why that's important.
Uh-oh. Yes. Somebody's paying attention. We getting there, though. We getting there. Getting there. All right, so let me go past this. All right, so I think that's all the notes that I wanted to get through on here. All right, so let me take this. No, we can't take that one. All right. Let me jump back to what I ended off at. So just give me 1 second. Does anybody have a question while I go look for this? Quick question.
So was that last scripture representative of the Feast of Tabernacles when Solomon dedicated the temple?
That's your homework. That's a great question. But you know, I like to inspire you guys to think. But yes, she's on the right track. She's definitely on the right track. Now, I want to read, there we go. Let me read this. I want to start right here. Because this is very, very important. How many of y'all know about the moon cult in ancient Mesopotamia? I do. All right. Anybody else besides the guy saying I do? He's practicing for that time period. He said, I do. Okay, y'all didn't get that. Never mind. Getting married, I do. All right, never mind. All right. So the moon cult in ancient Mesopotamia, very, very important. So how many of you are familiar with the moon cult in ancient Mesopotamia? Because if you don't understand this, you won't understand what happened to the so-called calendar. I think I've read some of this before. All right, I'm just going to go over a little bit of it so you can see. All right. So it says we have a treaty noted. We already have noted a treaty signed and sealed in the temple of sin of Haran. Haran is what in the Bible? What's important about Haran? Who went to Haran? Who migrated to Haran? Abraham. So he would have encountered this moon cult there, because Sin, which is the moon god, that's represented by a crescent, a sliver of light, to indicate that he was initiating the seasons for the ancient Mesopotamians. This was their culture. This was their custom. The sliver, the crescent, not the full moon. Okay. That was found in the royal archives of Mari. Look up the Mari tablets, very important. While the 14th century BCE kings of Hatti and Mitanni sealed their agreement with Sin and Shamash. In Hebrew, what does Shemesh mean? Shamash, what does that mean? Say again? The sun of Haran as witnesses. The special powers of Sin, the great Elohim of power, who dwells in Haran, was called upon again in the 8th century BCE to guarantee the treaty of Ashur-Neari V and Mati Ilu of Arpad, which means that the moon deity and sometimes the sun deity were responsible for initiating treaties. So whenever they went to do something, they would go in the name of the moon god and sometimes the sun god. But in Haran, it was more specifically the moon god. The political power of the deity, which is Sin, was extended to his earthly representatives. They represented him. The earthly kings represented the god Sin. Moon god, sliver of light, crescent, FVC, first visible crescent. That's all ancient Mesopotamia.
Come on now. Come on.
You're not following.
Break
It says, everywhere we find close ties between the institution of kingship and Father Nana, Lord of the shining crown, whose crescent shape was transformed into a mitra, the symbol of the royal crown. So now we have these ancient Mesopotamian kings, and to indicate their rulership or the divine right to rule, they wore a mitra that was symbolic of the crescent. Okay, I'm just trying to show you whose culture that is. All right. Let me read this real quick. Finally, the 6th century BCE, stela from Haran containing the words of Adad Gubi, the mother of Nabonidus. Very important. Nabu means what in Babylon? Babylonian. Let me see if anybody knows Babylonian cuneiform. Nabu means prince. You have Marduk, who is the reigning king of the deities. He's not the original deity, but he came forth from the ancient deities. And he destroyed Tiamat and used her body to create the world. I went over that before when I was talking about the Enuma Elish. and how the Babylonians reckon time based on their creation myth. But we see a situation here where it says that the last king of Babylon, Nabonidus, hails sin as the king of all gods, who calls her son to kingship. This is his mom. And it says, entrusted him, that she's a priestess, entrusted him with the kingship of Sumer and Akkad, also of all the countries from the borders of Egypt on the upper sea to the lower sea. Indeed, the stele of Nabonidus echoes the words of his mother. For me, Nabonidus, the lonely one who has nobody, and whose my heart was no thought of kingship, the gods and goddesses prayed to sin, and sin called me to kingship. The crescent deity, kingship, ancient Mesopotamia, Neo-Babylonian Empire. Okay, very important. I'm gonna go past. I think I read some of this before.
Brother, quick question.
Yes.
Just for those of us who do research, we'll look it up. How is that sins is spelled the same way S-I-N is
Yes,
spelled?
S-I-N. Yep. Mhm. All right. Thus, the code of the moon god Ur, where's Ur at? Where the Chaldeans are from, and later in Haran, and in whatever other city that he had been chosen to protect, patron deity, and make his own, would emphasize the power already granted him amongst the gods and tend to elevate his position in the divine hierarchy as much as possible. Therefore, when we consider the cult of the moon god of Haran, we must take into account the general political importance of the deity within the divine hierarchy, at least during the Babylonian-Syrian period, and then distinguish between those powers ascribed to him because of his lordship over the city, those accorded him for particular historical reasons, and those normally accorded to a male lunar deity. For example, the dream instruction that Nabonidus to rebuild the temple of the moon god at Haran calls upon sin as the lamp of heaven and earth. This is perfectly obvious epithet for a moon god, but when he is called king of all gods, the lord of all gods of heaven and the netherworld, that must be taken as political propaganda on the part of Nabonidus. Now, if they're elevating in Neo-Babylonian Empire because the Israelites are in captivity at this moment,
Come on, take your time, brother.
and you see them coming into contact with all of this information, but they didn't already know it, and now they're being assimilated into somebody else's culture. So now the moon, as far as the crescent, or the dark moon before the first sliver of light, is getting preeminence amongst the people of Israel when we went into captivity. But this was not so, based on what I was showing you about the full moon reckoning earlier. Okay.
Oh, and the laity, you just said, and to reconcile what you said, the laity that you showed in scripture, most of the people, is it fair to say, did not really know how to determine which day start. They had to depend on the priest.
There you go.
To tell them. So if there's no priesthood,
Right.
they had to depend on the Babylonians.
Oh, man. Frank, why'd you go there, Frank? and look at this. And there was some priests, some Levites, Benjamites, Levites, and Judites. They go into captivity, but the Levites were not working the temple no more. And what they did create in place of the temple? The synagogues. The synagogues started when they went into Babylon. This is where we get synagogues. Look it up, research it, it's interesting. And because of the fact that we have synagogues that started in Babylon, and there's no temple to reckon time, the priest was not important that much anymore. So now everybody's going to the priests that we see in Babylon, because you can't go into somebody's city. Somebody can't bring you to the city at this time. And let's say, for example, this city was a Republican, or this state was Republican. If you came in here, I don't care if you're a Democrat, if you're independent, if you're Green Party, you're Republican when you're in a state. It was the same way back then. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. Now, Nabonidus, he was the last king of Babylon. How many of you heard of him? All right, cool. Now, I mentioned this before when I ended off last time, and then I got about 45 minutes after this, and I should finish. But look what we see here. What do we see here? What's this? Crescent moon. This is the star. This is the sun. Crescent moon. This is the sun. This is the star. Very interesting. But it's always a crescent moon when they talk about the moon. Always a crescent moon. That's somebody else's culture. Okay. Somebody's going to get mad when they hear this. But I'm just sharing information. I'm giving y'all facts now. I'm not making this stuff up. All right.
Kick down the door.
Ruthless. All right. Nabonidus cylinder from right? This is what it looks like right here. Nabonidus cylinder from is a foundation text in which King Nabonidus of Babylonia describes how he repaired the ziggurat. What's the ziggurat? What's the ziggurat? Ziggurat is a step platform that's almost like a plateau that has a smooth top. And what happened was that people will go to the top of this to commune with the deities, because the higher you up on a post, the closer you are to, there you go. All right. So the ziggurats is almost the Mesopotamian version of the pyramids. The difference is they weren't built to be tombs. They were built to be places of worship and places where the priests will go through their rituals, etc. All right. So he describes, he wanted to repair the ziggurat called El Lugal Galga Zisa, which belonged into the temple of Sin. Who's Sin? Moon god in called Egisnugol. It is probably the king's last building inscription and maybe dated to 540 BCE. It is interesting because it offers full syncretism of Sin, Marduk, and Nabu. Nabu is the prince. Marduk is the reigning king, but also Sin is almost equal, or he is the reflection of Marduk. This is important. The translation of the Nabonidus symbol was made by Paul Alain Nielu, who is the author of The Reign of Nabonidus, King of Babylon, etc. in 1989. Now, I don't want to read all of this. I want you to go back and research this. But I will leave this. He says here, the ziggurat of Egisnugo, which is in which is Namu, one of the kings who preceded me, had built but not completed, and whose work his son Sogi had completed. For in the instructions of Namu and Sogi, his son, I read that Namu had built that ziggurat but not completed it, and that Zogi, his son, had completed his works. Now that the ziggurat had become old and on the ancient foundations in which Namu and Sogi, his son, had built, that ziggurat, as in former times, with bitumen and baked bricks, I repaired its damaged parts. And for Sin, the Lord of the gods of heaven and the netherworld, the King of the gods of gods, who dwells in the great heavens, the Lord Egisnugo, which is in my Lord, I built anew. Now, Nabonidus is really mentioned as one of the first ancient archaeologists because he excavated sites to rebuild things, but he dedicated it all to the god Sin, moon god worship. O Sin, my Lord, gods, King of the gods of heaven and the netherworld, gods of gods, who dwells in the great heavens, when you joyfully enter that temple, make good recommendations for Esaglia, Ezida, Egisnugo, the temples of your great godhood be set on your lips, and instill reverence for your great Godhead and the hearts of his people, so that they do not sin against your great Godhead. May their foundations be as firm as heaven. The king is saying this type of stuff about his deity. Best believe that everybody in those regions is doing the same thing. Okay. Let me move. Oh, wait. Let me read this. Oh, man, this is interesting. I'm going to read this real quick. As for me, Nabonidus, king of Babylon, save me from sinning against your great Godhead, and grant me as a present a lifelong of days. And as for Belshazzar, the eldest son, my offspring. Whoa, what? Instill reverence for your great Godhead in his heart, and may he not commit any occultic mistake. May he be sated with a life of plenitude. Now, I've seen this name in the Bible before, but I ain't see his name in the Bible. You know about this? Oh, man, this is good stuff. That's why history is important. All right, so this is another cylinder, again, that's Sipar, that he created. Again, it's saying the same thing. He's uplifting Marduk, but he's also talking about sin. Let's move forward. He says, you read this. Whoever you are, whom Sin and Samash will call to kingship, and in whose reign that temple will fall into disrepair, and who build it anew, may he be found, the inscription written in my name, not to alter it. May he anoint it with oil, perform a sacrifice, place it with the inscription written in his own name, and return to it in its original place. May Shamash and Anu Nitsu hear his supplication, receive his utterance, march at his side, annihilate his enemy, and daily speak good recommendation on his behalf to Sin, the Father, their creator. Again, Sin, crescent moon, observation, crescent moon, that would indicate Sin. That will also start the renewal process, and it will also be a allusion to the coronation ceremony in which the king would be aligned in alignment with. All goes back to Babylon. But let's move forward. What does that say up there? because when you read Bible commentaries and they talk about Nebuchadnezzar II, they said Belshazzar is the son. But then the Bible commentaries try to clean it up and say, oh, that just means that Nebuchadnezzar is not really his father, but he's an ancestor of his. Because they got to clean it up. The Bible says that's his son. We're not saying the Bible's wrong, but what we're saying is something happened in the translation manuscripts. Interesting. Let me read this real quick. The ancient Near Eastern sources used in this discussion constitute only a portion of the corpus portraying Nabonidus' elevation of the moon god's sin and his neglect of traditional Babylonian deities. Now, Nabonidus was hated by the priesthood because the priesthood elevated Marduk. He elevated sin. And it was so bad that the priest was conspiring with Cyrus to kill Nabonidus. That's how bad it was. People were turning against them. When it came to their deities and the priesthood, that was a serious thing. And if you go back and look at Akhenaten in the Amarna period, same kind of thing happened. He was trying to take the power away from the priesthood. And he was not trying to have that. Okay, go back and research that. And his neglect of traditional Babylonian deities, his sojourn to Tema, we're going to see what that is, and his general dislike by the Babylonian populace. Even these few examples, however, make it clear that the editors of Daniel 4 reworked the historical Nabonidus tradition and applied it secondarily to Nebuchadnezzar. This is further confirmed by the Quran prayer of Nabonidus, which from its discovery has been cited as evidence that Daniel 4 originally pertained to Nabonidus. In this account, it is Nabonidus who is healed from an affliction in Tema and is told by a Jewish geezer of Gaza to praise Elohim Most High. Looking at the text of Daniel itself, it seems that Nebuchadnezzar was not the original subject of the narrative, since the Masoretic text never reproaches Nebuchadnezzar for the destruction of the temple, rather only for his arrogance. If this text had been originally written to punish Nebuchadnezzar, we would expect the king to have been explicitly condemned for his actions as he is in the OG original. But this is not the case in the Masoretic text, and I agree with John Collins that it is unlikely that such a potent theme would have been omitted by the Masoretic text, and it's more probably an OG expansion. The substitution of Nebuchadnezzar for Nabonidus in Daniel 4 most likely took place after the story was brought to Palestine, for Babylon, since the more accurate tradition presumably persisted in Babylonian circles. So when it was in Babylon and leaving from Babylon to Palestine, the oral tradition changed and who they should ascribe this hatred for, Nabonidus or Nebuchadnezzar. It's interesting. It says, universally as condemnation of any king, though perhaps none as significant as Antiochus IV. Like the historical Nebuchadnezzar, Antiochus ravaged Jerusalem and desecrated but not destroyed its temple. Although neither Nebuchadnezzar nor Belshazzar nor Darius the Mede is made into a portrait of Antiochus. Remember, Antiochus, they said he was evil and he was all types of stuff. Some of the things that are said about them and their actions could not fail to make men think of Antiochus and were doubtless intended to do so. Thus, when Daniel 4 is linked with the apocalypse of chapter 7 and 12, the late editors seize the opportunity to contrast the reign of Antiochus with that of Nebuchadnezzar. While chapter 4 highlights how Elohim himself ordained previous kings because they accepted his sovereignty, the apocalypse of the Hebrew chapters of Daniel depict a very different scene, one where the king challenges even the deity. Therefore, we can expect that Antiochus' afflictions will be far worse than Nebuchadnezzar's, and unlike the Babylonian king, Antiochus' kingdom will not be held for him, but given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. In summary, we can glean much evidence from the ancient Asian sources documenting the reign of the Neo-Babylonian king Nabonidus that aligns with the description of the king of Daniel 4. Due to the preponderance of this evidence, it seems most probable that the story of the madness of King Nebuchadnezzar was rooted in the rich tradition surrounding Nebuchadnezzar's latest successor and applied retrospectively to the king destined to live in infamy in the Jewish imagination for his highness destruction of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. What does this mean? Let's make it plain. All right, make it plain. This means that we had a situation when Nebuchadnezzar came and did what he did to the temple, brought people into captivity, but the Most High used him to punish Israel, right? Israel, the southern tribes, it was going astray. But we never see no condemnation because he destroyed the temple, only because of his arrogance, right? So going into captivity, the story was written about what had happened in Jerusalem and the captivity. But when the Israelites went back to their land and restored everything, now, during that period of time, Nabonidus was the last king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar was the one that the Israelites encountered when he brought them into captivity. Nabonidus was the last king. Now, with the last king situation, when they went back into Palestine, they heard all these stories about this last king straying away from the priesthood of Marduk and going into the desert and going mad and all this other stuff. And what they did was the redactors of the text intertwined the story of Nabonidus and superimposed it on Nebuchadnezzar, because that priesthood had hatred for Nebuchadnezzar later on because he was the result of them going into captivity and now them having to go back into the land and rebuild the temple in the city. Okay, good stuff. You guys say, what's your evidence of this? Good evidence of this. DSS 4Q242 in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Nabonidus confesses his sins and explains how he was healed. Interesting, because this predates the Masoretic text. Predates a lot of stuff that we see in the book of Daniel, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The words of the prayer of Nabonidus, king of Babylon, the great king, when he was smitten with a severe inflammation at the command of Elohim in Tema, which is a place in Arabia. I, Nabonidus, was smitten with a severe inflammation lasting 7 years, because I was thus changed. Becoming like a beast, I prayed to the Most High, and he forgave my sins. An exorcist, an Israelite, in fact, a member of the community of exiles, came to me and said, declare and write down this story, and so ascribe glory and greatness to the name of Elohim Most High. Accordingly, I have myself written it down. I was smitten with a severe inflammation while in Tenda on the desert by the command of Elohim the Most High. Then for 7 years, I continued praying to the Elohim of the gods, made of silver, gold, bronze, iron, wood, stone, clay, for I used to think that they were really gods. Do you remember that story in Daniel when he's praying? He went mad, and then he acknowledged the Most High, they got restored. This is where the tradition comes from. And then they superimpose that onto Nebuchadnezzar later on. Interesting stuff. When you read Daniel 4, you'll see. Because remember, Belshazzar is the son of Nabonidus, not the son of Nebuchadnezzar. But when you don't do this type of textual criticism and history, you miss all of this. And the reason why this is important, because this also hides the moon worship, also hides first crescent, also hides sin. If you take his name out, you remove all the things that he was doing to elevate this moon goddess and the importance of the moon in ancient Babylon. So now you can hide where you're getting this first visible crescent from. You can hide where you get this renewal cycle with the dark moon. You can hide the stuff now if you're the priesthood, because you're the one redacting the text.
Oh, wow.
All right. It's going to come. Yes, you can ask.
And all the movements of Harry Potter, all the magicians and all had that Christian.
I didn't even realize that.
And garment.
Because remember we said the mitra of the crescent was worn by the king. Are y'all understanding what's going on? I hope I didn't hurt nobody's feelings yet. I'm just working. I'm just giving you facts. Okay. This is the chiefly derived from a chronological tablet containing the annals of Nabonidus, supplemented by another inscription of Nabonidus, where he recounts his restoration of the temple of the moon god at Haran, as well as his proclamation of Cyrus issued shortly after his formal recognition as king of Babylon. Let me skip through all this. I want to read all of this. But in 538 BC, Cyrus invaded Babylonia. Remember I told you that Nabonidus went to the desert. So he left his post in Babylon and went to an Arabian desert because he was going mad. They said this guy might have had seizures. They said this guy was bugging out, like we say in modern terms. And he left where he was at because he was getting a lot of criticism, and he went to the desert to get restored. Because he said he was going mad. He went to the desert to get restored. And that's when he got into this thing with this deity and prayed to it and got restored. But it's too late. 538 BC, Cyrus invaded Babylonia. A battle was fought at Alpis in the month of June, where the Babylonians were defeated, and immediately afterwards, Zipporah surrendered to the invader. Nabonidus fled to Babylon, where he was pursued by Gobryas, the governor of Kurdistan, and on the 16th of Tammuz, 2 days after the capture of Zipporah, the soldiers of Cyrus entered Babylon without fighting. Nabonidus was dragged from his hiding place, and Kurdish guards were placed at the gates of the great temple of Bel. Did we see that in scripture somewhere? What does that mean? I went over this before when I did part 1. Bel means what? In Babylonian cuneiform. What does it mean? Lord. Bel of Babylon, the Lord of Babylon. It was another name or title that was used in place of Marduk because his name was too holy. So we got to use Lord instead. Now you start to see where that tradition comes from. Go back to part 1 and you see, I talk about that. But a lot of these customs that the Israelites brought back with them, they got from Babylon. Showing you facts. Huh? Where the services continue with interruptions. Cyrus did not arrive until the 3rd March October, but Gobryas hadn't acted for him in his absence. Gobryas was now made governor of the province of Babylon, and a few days afterwards, the son of Nabonidus had died. So Nabonidus died, his sons had died. It says Nabonidus, in fact, had excited strong feelings against himself by attempting to centralize the religion of Babylonia in the temple of Merodach or Marduk at Babylon. And while he had thus alienated the local priesthoods, the military partly despised him on account of his antiquarian tastes, telling them, oh, we got to go and dig up the ziggurat and rebuild it. Oh, we got to go and worship Marduk. And the soldiers are like, yo, this guy's bugging out because it's typically the priests are the ones that assist in the king with this. And this guy's doing whatever the heck he wants to do. So the people turned against him. And when Cyrus came in, he sent the governor before him, and the people helped give up this guy when he went to Babylon. It says he seems to have left the defense of his kingdom to others, occupying himself with the more congenial work of excavating the foundation records of the temples and determining the dates of their builders. So he was an archaeologist, right? So that's that. This is very important. And I got to read this. Please give me a little bit of time to read this. What does the title say?
Judeans living in Babylonian exile.
And if you want to know one of the most important parts of this lecture, before I get to the end, is this right here. How many of y'all read about how the Judeans were living while they were in Babylonian exile? Raise your hand. That's one. That's two. All right. Because if you don't know how they was living,
Come on.
yeah. Oh, what you say? Say it again. They were living large in a city where you had to worship the moon. How you gonna be prosperous in a city where you worship the moon unless you are also adopting those customs? Okay. Yeah. All right. Little else is known from the Bible about the fate of the Judeans who remain in Babylon. Although some revisionists have cast doubt on the historicity of the exile narrative, archaeological evidence confirms the presence and activities of some Judean exiles living in southern Mesopotamia. The biblical text of Ezra and Nehemiah also specified that although some exiles returned to Judah following Cyprus' decree, most were reluctant after a half-century of living in Mesopotamia to give up their professions and material comforts, sounds interesting, in order to return to the hardships of life in a devastated countryside. The prophet Jeremiah sent a letter from Jerusalem to the exilic community urging them to build houses and live in them, plant gardens, eat their fruit, take wives, beget sons and daughters, take wives for your sons, give your daughters to husbands, they may bear sons and daughters, multiply there, do not decrease, and seek the welfare or the prosperity of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray or appeal to the Most High on its behalf, for in its prosperity you shall prosper. Right? Jeremiah 29:5-7. Jeremiah's letter appears to assume that his addressees possess the resources to purchase land and partake in a comfortable lifestyle, a depiction of the exile's economic welfare that is now partly confirmed by the archaeological record. Israelites went into exile. That exile is supposed to be a purging period. 70 years. Yo, you let that's God's commandments, you let the land rest. Now you guys are going to suffer. So instead of them doing what they were supposed to do, taking their whipping like a man, they was like, yo, they got a lot of stuff going on here. What? Listen to our people now. They're like, yo, we sitting here, they put us on this particular prime land here, and we could be landowners, and we can be economic and prosperous. But remember, the Babylonian calendar. Anytime you did a transaction, you have to have a receipt. The receipt has the date, time, all that. There was cuneiforms that we're going to get in, and I'm going to show you these cuneiforms where the Israelites was doing transactions, because at this time they were not fluent in Aramaic cuneiform, right, which then eventually turned into Aramaic script. They had to have priests or people in Babylon write out their receipts. And when they wrote out their receipts, they would write it according to the date of the months, according to the Babylonian calendar. And the month started, dark moon, sliver of light, that's when the moon started. So if you're going to be economically prosperous and you're going to be engaging in transactions and captivity, in order for you to be recognized and be given share of land and so forth, you have to adopt the customs of the land you live in. Before we got brought here to America, some of us who are so-called African Americans, we had a totally different lifestyle than when we got here. And when we got here, we went through slavery, etc. But when we got emancipated up until today, in order for you to be economically prosperous, you have to accept the calendar system. Because you can't go nowhere with any transaction without a date, without a receipt. And that date is going to show you who has ownership over your mind, your body, and your soul. So the Israelites are prospering here. It must be because they're getting along with the Babylonians. Okay. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. In 1893, a group of University of Pennsylvania archaeologists unearthed more than 700 cuneiform tablets amid the ruins of ancient Nepal. dating between about 454 and 43, approximately 150 years after the beginning of the exile. The documents describe the business activities of the well-to-do Murashu family of financiaries. I want you to look up who the Murashu family is. An analysis of the archive by the Israeli scholar Ranza Dove revealed around 70 Judean-type names of individuals who were engaged in various types of business activities. A few dealt with monetary affairs as business agents, rent collectors, and debitors, while most worked in agriculture as either small landowners or tenants who rented their fields. Others held low-level jobs as fishermen, bird keepers, or stock herders. Business documents from other sites in Babylon describe some Judeans as holding public office. How the hell are you going to hold public office if you got your own calendar system? Don't work that way. If you're worshiping your own deity, don't work that way. So some things you got to sacrifice and compromise if you're going to be prosperous in another land.
Come on now.
Okay.
Come on.
Anyway, even serving as royal merchants. Others are recorded as traveling abroad on behalf of private business entrepreneurs. And still others as slave owners who treated their slaves in accordance with Babylonian rather than biblical law. So that means that if you have slaves, there's no 7-year Yobel. The heck is that? Now I ain't got to release no slaves. So now, of course, I'm going to be happy staying in Babylon. Why would I want to go back and build a city? And you tell me in 7 years, I'm glad I'm out of that situation. I ain't got to let nobody go. Perpetual slavery. So now you're looking to make a profit off these slaves or these indentured servants. Of course, they're going to sit there and say, Babylon, would you rush back? You got to give away these slaves? Most I told you not to make slaves of the people, because now what you're doing is the same thing that Mizraim of Egypt was reportedly doing to the Israelites. So in Babylon, it's anything goes. It's anything goes. See, they forgot why they was there. And we forget why we're here today.
Come on now. Come on.
Okay. The fact that some exiles prospered and amassed considerable wealth supports the assertion recorded in Ezra chapter 1, verses 4 to 6. Chapter 2, 65, 69, Nehemiah 761, 767, and 71, that returning exiles possessed slaves and contributed silver, gold, precious goods, and livestock towards the rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple. So now, we don't know that part of history. We don't know how the Israelites got all this stuff, because if they get taken and sieged by the Chaldeans and brought into slavery, how are you bringing all of the silver and gold and this lot? How are you bringing all this stuff back? Unless you're prosperous where you was at. The Bible doesn't tell you what happened in that part of history, but archaeology does. This is why I cried to go out for them to leave and come back. A lot of them didn't want to leave. They're doing well in Babylon. Most High saying destruction is coming on Babylon. All right, that's nice. Let me go back to these slaves I got, this business merchant, this public office. They're not even caring about them. Just like what? Just like we are? My heart, somebody said it. Towards the rebuilding temple. The biblical record also indicates that many exiles suffered as slaves while living in captivity. Those who survived the sword of Nebuchadnezzar exiled in Babylon, and they became his sons and his servants. So some of them were servants. In this case, and slaves. And that's interesting, because if they were slaves of a fellow Israelite, remember, they didn't have Jubilee to rescue them. All right? And they didn't even have to let the land rest. So they could perpetually keep cultivating the land as much as they want. So they just allowed you to do whatever you wanted to do, all against what the Most High wanted to do. In this case, Babylonian record keeping is of little assistance. Neither economic records nor official state propaganda deal with the plight of the disenfranchised. Rather, cuneiform records seem to support Jeremiah's statement that urged those in captivity to develop new lives for themselves and their families. The Most High said, listen, since y'all not leaving and y'all want to stay here, at least be autonomous. Set up shop, your own community, while you're in captivity, so that way you won't be part of the society that's designed to oppress you and to punish you because you didn't listen to what I said. Israelites did the express opposite. They assimilated and integrated instead of being their own autonomous. Okay. It's interesting, right? They were still hard-headed, even in punishment. Rather, cuneiform records seem to support Jeremiah's statement. Okay, I read all of that. Similarly, the prophet Ezekiel implies that he comfortably dwelled in the Judean community in Babylonia that possessed its own leadership. A preliminary study of the archive indicates that Judean deportees were resettled in the Babylonian countryside as part of a policy that transplanted whole groups according to their ethnic origins. The name of their town they lived in was Little Yehudu. Interesting, right? That's what they call their little town. The exiles were designated as Shushanus, a term indicating that as landowners of income-producing property, they were of a judicial class of state dependents, bound to their lands and subject to the state service but exempted from being sold into chattel slavery. Ancient sources stress the fertility of the Babylonian lands that lay beside the rivers and canals and the potential tax benefits from farming new territories. The crown authorities provided land to the refugees to be cultivated and irrigated. So they didn't just take them just to take them. They gave them a mission and they gave them an assignment. And because they was in a place that was well off, the Israelites took that and said, now we can set up shop and do whatever we want to do. You're not in the land no more. Do whatever you want to do. It says representative of the royal administration performed military and/or work duties for certain periods. So they was even in the military of the year. No Judeans or others in the archive appear to have been slaves driven by overbearing taskmasters. So you didn't see the stuff that was going on in Egypt happening to here. So the reason why they were exiled and so they could be deported somewhere else because the Israelites were astute agriculturalists and pastoralists. They had skills. So that's why they had to take a lot of the skilled men or the tradesmen, bring them to certain areas in Babylon so they can help to rebuild their cities and their lands and all of that. Oh, what? Wait, hold on. Wait a second, sis. You got to say that again, sis. I don't think they heard you. Say it loud. The transatlantic slave trade. Nothing new under the sun. A little different because the way they treated us here was not the same way we treated there, but the concept is the same. It's an economic endeavor by our oppressors because they knew the skill set and the worth of Israelites. But sometimes we don't even know how powerful we are. But they do. All right. Let me skip past that. All right. This is now look at this. 3 Canadian town forts. It says this is the Marushu register in Nippur. It says Elu. Yahuwah is Elohim. So we even see this written on some of the cuneiform scripts there. That's interesting. Israelites even saying that the Most High, some of them saying that he's still Elohim. But are they keeping the statutes, laws, and commandments? Not enough to know his name, but not follow his decree. So you could name of the president, but if you're not in accordance with the statutes and the acts and the laws of America, you're not really a citizen. So knowing the name of the Most High is not enough. You have to obey his word. Anybody can know the name, but are they obeying his word? Because the name means a character. A character is an attribute. You have to possess that which he has. And if he's diligent to do for you, you have to be diligent to do for him. All right. The Judeans operated their business on property, held low-level official administrative position, and acted as agents, all in accordance with Babylonian law. Some families purchased their own slaves and had the right to free assembly, the right to sue. Free assembly, when we get to synagogues, the right to sue, to witness contracts, to issue promissory notes, to lease property, to collect debts, to buy and sell livestock and grain, to travel without restrictions, and to amass wealth and material possessions. So now the Most High was telling the Israelites, don't get too haughty when you get all this stuff in the land and you forget who I am. But in Babylon, the Babylonians just give them everything. You think they're going to care about the Most High? They get everything? Why would I want to limit my carnal desires by this Torah when I'm in a land where they allow me to do whatever the heck I want? Sound like America. But anyway, let's move on. The study of personal names indicate that Judeans were readily willing to give their children traditional Babylonian names. Oh man, intermarriage, however, between native Babylonian men and foreign women was rare, so at least they knew not to intermarry. It says, in some, the exiled Judeans maintained their own communities and identities as they became integrated into Babylonian society, and now the priests are not there anymore in a temple to reckon time, so the only way of reckoning time will be using the methodology of the Babylonian priesthood. So now you know some history that you didn't read in the Bible, and now you can see how people were living. Okay. This brings everything to full circle. Matter of fact, let me let you see this real quick. Hold on. You see, this is where Nippur was at, right? Tel Aviv, etc. They were in this region right here along the Euphrates River. Tyrus is right here. So they placed us in fertile places where the Israelites was already agriculturalists and knew our trade, and they used us to cultivate the land and gave us benefits for doing so. And if you see, we came from here, Jerusalem, and they took us all the way over here. It's a long journey because they didn't have planes, they didn't have cars. On foot, camel, whatever. That's a long travel. So you can see why they wasn't in a rush to get up and leave. Say, we came all the way out here, we prospered, then we got to get up and leave? We ain't going. With our stuff? We ain't going nowhere. All right. Oh, sounds like here in America. A lot of us. But anyway, Israel sought after the Babylonian culture for insight and foresight. Bel has bowed down. Remember you saw Bel? Nebo stoops over Nebu. Nebo is another rendering of Nebu. Nebu means what? I said it earlier, begins with a P. Prince. Bel means what?
Lord.
Lord. And it's the title for Marduk, because his name was too holy. Too holy. So we got that's the name. The images was co-signed to the beast and the cattle. The things that you carry are burdensome, a load for the very beast. They stoop over, they have bowed down together. They cannot rescue the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Yaakov, and all the remnant of the house of Israel. You who have been born by me from birth and have been carried from the womb, even to your old age, I will be the same. And even to your graying years, I will bear you. I have done it. I will carry you. I will bear you. I will deliver you. To whom would you liken me and make me equal and compare that we would be alike? Most High was saying to them while they was lusting after Bel, Nabu, and all the riches and possessions and privileges in Babylon. He's saying, if you come back to me, I will restore you. This is a whooping. They was trying to escape that beating. Your mom takes a belt, she's about to whoop you until you go to the switch. Try to run a little bit, she's gonna catch you, she's gonna whoop that behind. But that is not designed to destroy you, it's designed to teach you something, right? For your own benefit. They didn't see that as such. Most High saying, why are you going after these other deities when I'm the one who's responsible for bringing where you at because you were disobedient? Isaiah 47:1 says, come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon, sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for you shall no longer be called tender and delicate. You are weary with your many counsels. Let now the astrologers, wait a second, we're talking about calendar.
Take your time.
Okay. Let now the astrologers, those who prophesy by the stars, those who predict by the new moons, wait a second, Most High, please rewind. Y'all missed this. I'm going to say it again. You are weary with your many counsels, making a distinction, talking about the Babylonians. Let now your astrologers, those who prophesy by the stars, those who predict by the new moons. Look up to see what this word is. Stand up and save you from what will come upon you. So have those become to you with whom you have labored, whom have trafficked with you from your youth. Each has wandered in his own way. There is none to save you. So now, the Babylonians had astrologers who prophesied by the stars. Remember I told you about the astrolabes? And the astrologers are the ones that look at the stars and they determine what's going on in the constellations and the heavenly bodies and see how it's affecting human affairs. And they make predictions every time there's a new moon. So this new moon is attached to the prophecy by stars and the astrologers in ancient Babylon that's distinct from Israel. Because if it's one and the same, he wouldn't say nothing about them predicting things by new moons. He wouldn't be speaking about the astrologers if the same methodology that they have to determine time is the same as the Israelites. Okay. Are y'all following me?
Yes, sir.
You got me, Minister Khan? Is this all right?
All right.
All right, hold on. Let's move forward. Beckoning call for the Judeans to leave Babylon. And the Most High yell at them and tell them, get up out of there.
Come on.
Yay and nay.
Yay.
The word of Yahuwah came spoke concerning Babylon, the land of the Chaldeans, through Jeremiah the prophet. Declare and proclaim amongst the nations. Proclaim it. Lift up a standard. Do not conceal it, but say, Babylon has been captured. Bel has been put to shame. Marduk has been shattered. Her images have been put to shame. Her idols have been shattered. For a nation has come up against her out of the north. It will make her land an object of horror, and there will be no inhabitant in it. Both man and beast, have wandered off, they have gone astray. In those days, and at that time, declares Yahuwah, the sons of Israel will come, both they and the sons of Judah as well. They will go along weeping as they go, and it will be that Yahuwah the Elohim they will seek. They will ask for the way to Zion, turning their faces in this direction. They will come that they may join themselves to Yahuwah in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. Wander away from the midst of Babylon and go forth from the land of the Chaldeans. Be also like male goats at the head of the flock. For behold, I am going to arouse and bring up against Babylon a horde of great nations from the land of the north, and they will draw up their battle lines against her. For there she shall be taken captive. Their arrows will be like an expert warrior who does not return empty-handed. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty, the Elohim of Israel says, I will punish the king of Babylon and his land as I have punished the king of Assyria. But I will bring Israel back to their own pasture, and they will graze on Carmel and Bashan. Their appetite will be satisfied on the hills of Ephraim and Gilead. A sword against the Chaldeans, declares Yahuwah, and against the inhabitants of Babylon, and against her officials and her wise men. A sword against the oracle priests, and they will become fools. A sword against our mighty men, and they will be shattered. A sword against their horses, and against their chariots, and against the foreigners who are in the midst of her, and they will become women a sword against her treasures, and they will be plundered. Women meaning they will be humbled, and they will be plundered. So the Most High is telling them, this is what I'm going to do to Babylon. Y'all need to get the hell up out of there, or at least be autonomous. Because if you're connected to the Babylonian system, you're going to suffer the same condemnation and judgment as the Babylonians. Because when the Most High sent in the judgments, and you may be an Israelite, but if you're acting just like the other people,
Come on now.
you're going to side with your people. When the destruction comes, oh yeah, I think we all should run. Instead of listening to the Most High, said, listen, we need to stay here, set up shop, and be preserved until these judgments are passed.
Yeah.
This is what was going on back then. But you see how prosperous we were. You think we was listening to this?
No.
You ain't going nowhere. Israelites ain't going nowhere. Sound like us today.
Yeah.
Most High telling her, come out of her, my people.
Same thing.
Flee from the midst of Babylon. Each of you save his life. Do not be destroyed in her punishment, for this is the Lord's time of vengeance. He is going to render recompense to her. We applied healing to Babylon, but she was not healed. Forsake her, and let each of us go to his own country, for her judgment has reached to heaven, and the towers up to the very skies. Come forth from her midst, my people, and each of you save yourselves from the fierce anger of the Most High. Now so that your heart does not grow faint, and you are not afraid at the report that will be heard in the land, for the report will come 1 year, and after that another report another year, and violence will be in the land with ruler against ruler. What is this saying? The Most High is telling them to come out, be autonomous, or go back to your own country, because if you don't, your heart is going to grow faint, because you're going to hear reports of things that's happening in the world, happening in America. But if we're living autonomously here in America, why are we worried about what's going on in the world?
Come on, Prospect. Come on now.
I think y'all missed that.
Say
Culture and
it again.
autonomy is intertwined. Why? Because if we are integrated fully into this American system,
Come on.
anything that happens to America, oh yeah, we should be concerned about it. But if we live in autonomously, according to the statute laws, commandments, and ways God wants us to, and we're doing ourselves to govern our own affairs, then we should not worry about what's going on out there, because the punishment is not meant for us, but the punishment is meant for them. I'm not supposed to be preaching this time. I'm just speaking to you. Yeah, I'm gonna run through this part. Now, the Persian calendar was based off of the Babylonian calendar. Okay, and the first part I go over the Babylonian calendar. The Persian calendar was based on the Babylonian calendar. But what they were trying to do was trying to find a way to fix it, because they had a lot of local calendars. And what they were trying to do was fix the calendar to fix what's called the intercalary. So intercalary is when you use the lunar cycle to reckon a full year. You only get 354, 355 days. You're off about 11 to 10 days. So what they had to do was create a fixed system to add a 13th month to even out the calendar. That is not in the pre-exilic tradition of the ancient Israelites. That is a Babylonian custom that is later borrowed by the Persians. So if there's a calendar system that's using intercalation in regards to a 13th month, that tradition did not come from the scriptures, because we don't have anywhere the Most High told the Israelites how to intercalate when the calendar is off. We don't have any provisions for that. As far as politically, there is provisions, naturally. You don't get that. You don't follow. The institution of a fixed calendar in Persia and its diffusion in the eastern and northern parts of the Persian Achaemenid Empire at some point in the late 6th or 5th century BCE was a very radical change from its early calendrical practice. Our knowledge of the earlier calendar of Persia is limited, but it was very clearly lunar. Most of the evidence belongs to the last decades of its existence, when it was becoming assimilated to the Babylonian calendar. This process of assimilation deserves attention, as it may provide a background to the adoption of the fixed Egyptian calendar soon after. Because of the nature of the evidence, the old Persian calendar will be considered together with that of Elam, the region line between Mesopotamia and Persia, right? So you'll see a lot of the Persian reckoning of the moon found its way into Islam because of what was going on in Arabia and the Near East at that time. Very interesting. We'll do some research on that, right? The old Persian intercalations above mentioned for years 503, 502, and 499 BCE are inconsistent, not only with the Babylonian calendar as we have seen, but also with the old Persian dates of other documents. It says the 4 deviant cases, which is the years they're talking about here, may thus be regarded as exceptional to the general pattern of old Persian adoption to the Babylonian calendar. I'm trying to show you that Babylon is still influencing other nations even after its demise.
Yes, sir.
And we're still adopting it. It was not fully or consistently implemented. Explanation may in fact be given as to why the dates particular documents were not adopted to the Babylonian calendar. So they're talking about the different minute changes that the Persians was making to have a fixed calendar. What is a fixed calendar? Something that's consistent every year. Intercalation was done by the Babylonians, but it was done by the kingly decree or whenever the priest decided it was time to add an extra month. Here, they were trying to set up a system so that way they have a pattern in which they can follow that is consistent where intercalation happens and they would know precisely when it would happen. You hear things like the 19-year cycle. Have you ever heard about that? The Metonic cycle, 19-year cycle. You heard about Dar 2? What's a Dar 2? You know what a Dar 2 is? Dar 2 is what?
13 months.
The 13th month. All that stuff came from Babylon, and it was fixed to a system that was consistent in Persia. And then later, you had the Zoroastrian calendar. Our knowledge of the Persian Zoroastrian calendar depends mostly entirely on early medieval sources, from which period the calendar has remained unchanged with only minor modifications until today. Nevertheless, as we shall see, there is firm evidence that it was instituted already in the early Achaemenid period. Now, Zoroastrian, I'm not going to get too much into that, but Cyrus was a proto-Zoroastrian, but Darius was a full Zoroastrian.
Right.
So now the calendar changed from the Babylonian way, which was consistent, to a slightly more modified. Again, Babylon is still the foundation. In contrast to the old Persian calendar, the Persian Zoroastrian calendar was non-lunar and fixed. Interesting. It consisted of 12 months and 30 days plus 5 additional epagomeno days. What is the epagomeno day? Anybody? Okay. So typically, you're supposed to have 360 days in a solar year, typically, 365 in a calendar year. And those 5 days are considered epagomeno days because those days are not officially included into the calendar system. That's what an epagomeno day is. It's just the in-between time to fix things. That's like an intercalation. A 13th month is designed to fix things. Those 30 days and a 13th month year is designed to fix the calendar so it can be in alignment with the tropical year. Got me?
Gotcha.
Its almost complete identity could not be possibly have fortuitous and leads to the inescapable conclusion that the Persian Zoroastrian calendar was directly modeled on the Egyptian. Like the Egyptian civil calendar, Persian 365 calendar drifted from the seasons 1 day every 4 years. So they still had issues even when they tried to fix that. Various Muslim authors from the 10th century acknowledged that this held true in their own period, but claimed that in the pre-Islamic period, the Persians corrected this drift by intercalating one 30-day month every 120 years. Again, anytime you have an intercalation, that is not indigenous to pre-exilic Israel. That comes from somebody else's culture. What time is it? I didn't even recognize what time it was. Nobody even, what time? 3:41? Is that late? Okay. Do I have a few more minutes? I may have to do a part 3. Would that be okay? Do a part 3? Part 3 is fine. All right. So let me just get to at least 5 more slides, all right? So what does this say up here?
Israelites did not have names after Babylonian exile.
Really? They did? What was the 4 names that they had before they went into exile? Abib, Zeb, or Zib, what's the other one? Boom, and what else? Ethanim, or Ethanim, right? But when they went into Babylonian captivity and they left out to go set up shop in Jerusalem through the decree of Cyrus, the game changed. They might want to wonder, where's Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah? Now it happened in the month of what? Kislev. In the 20th year, while I was in Susa, the capital. And this is the Nehemiah. This is during the captivity. Before the captivity, you don't have these months in there. Something happened. Game changed. Okay. Nehemiah 2:1, and it came about in the month of Nisan. But they were, Nisan? What month is that?
Exactly.
What month is Nisan? Abib. Why are people today still using these names when they're not even indigenous to pre-exilic Israel unless it's residue from Babylon? In the 20th year of King Xerxes, Nehemiah 6:15. So the war was completed on the 25th of the month Elul in 52 days. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus to his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebet. Esther 3:7, in the first month, which is the month Nisan. And it says that is a lot was cast before Haman from day to day and from month to month until the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Ezra 6:15, the temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month of Adar. Esther 8:9-8 says, so the king's scribes is called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan. Zechariah 1:7, on the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month of Shabbat. not the same Shabbat, but Shabbat. In the second year of Darius, Zechariah 71, in the 4th year of King Darius, the word of Yahuwah came to Zechariah on the 4th day of the 9th month, which is Sheslev. These were not months that the Israelites had before they went into captivity. So if you see us adopting the names of a calendar from another entity, it goes to show you that that was not our original system. Why are we still using this today? Okay. Unless somebody is thinking about the old times when we was prosperous in the land, and they're using that kind of ideology to be economically prosperous today by assuming the identity of the indigenous people, acting like they are the people of the book, and they're using that Babylonian system to become prosperous today. See, this is how you know that the, wait, hold on, man. I ain't get there. This is how you know those who say they are Jews are not really Jews. Because if they were, they'd be going back to the tradition of their forefathers. They would not be keeping the traditions of the exiles in captivity. Unless the captivity in Babylon remind them of prosperity.
They are very prosperous.
There you go. Economics, material possessions, political control. The so-called Jews today, that's what they're doing, because they're taking the real identity from the real Israelites. And the identity they're taking is not that of the pre-exilic times, but the time when we was prosperous in Babylon, using the same methods that they used back then to become rich and prosperous today. That's how you know they're all not the people of the book. If they are, they're the stiff-necked ones, not the ones Most High tell them to come out of the system. Scattered Israelites attempts to unify reckoning of time to establish festivals during the purging captivity. So we have here the Passover letter. Anybody read the Passover letter? Anybody? Passover letter, Minister Khan's Passover letter? Really? Ah. This is from Elephantine Island, or the Elephantine Papyrus. Okay. She looking at me like, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. Make it plain, brother. All right. So what happened was the Israelites were scattered. You know they were scattered, right? 4 corners of the earth. There were Israelites that was in Elephantine Island. Elephantine Island is an island along the Nile River that's more towards the south. There was Israelites that were stationed there, that lived there. And what happened was, now that they are in captivity, now that they are scattered, they don't have a unified system of reckoning time anymore. This period was 419 BCE. When did the Israelites go into captivity? Babylonian captivity. 586. We're talking about over 150 plus years have already went by without us having access to our own calendar. It's a long period of time where Israelites scattered everywhere, being adopted and going into other nations, adopting their method of reckoning time. So now when these people in Egypt, hearing that Israelites are going back to the land, setting up shop again, they want to send word to ensure that there's solidarity in regards to the calendar. So what they did was they sent a letter to get the instruction on how to institute Passover, Pesach, while they were in other places in captivity. The letter says, to my brothers Jedaiah, Jedaniah, and his colleagues, the Jewish troop, or Israelite troop, your brothers Hananiah, the welfare of my brothers made Elohim seek after all times. And now this year 5 of Darius the king, when the Israelites are doing their thing in the land and they reestablish in Pesach, it was in a particular year of reign of Darius. You should go back and research that so you'll see an alignment. It says, now you thus count 14 days of Nisan, and on the 14th at twilight, the Passover observed. And from day 15 until day 21 of Nisan, the festival of unleavened bread observed. 7 days unleavened bread eat. Now be pure, clean, and take heed. Work do not do on the 15th, and on day 21 of Nisan, any fermented drink do not drink, and anything of leaven do not eat, and do not let it be seen in your houses from day 14 of Nisan sunset until day 21 of Nisan sunset. And any leaven which you have in your houses, bring into your chambers and seal them up during these days. Now, why is this important? Aside trying to get solidarity in regards to the calendar system that they're trying to restore back in Jerusalem on the land, now we have extra biblical evidence of Passover being kept by Israelites. So when they say that our culture is only in scriptures, this is extra biblical evidence that validates exactly how we establish Passover.
Come on.
This gives you evidence that you had to have a Torah into existence in some form of fashion to have a political solidarity in regards to holding a feast, festival, or time.
Come on now.
This is rich. This is good stuff, all right?
Good stuff.
Someone's done with this part. All right, I think I might stop here. I think I might stop. Yeah, well, actually, all right, let me end off on this. I'm gonna end off with the Grecian calendar, and after that, I'll be done, right? So, how many of you know about the Macedonian calendar? Raise your hand.
Or at least continue the part 3.
All right. All right.
Not done.
All right, not done. Okay.
There you go.
There you go. All right, so I'm gonna read about the Greeks, and then when I do part 3, whenever Minister Khan says okay. When I get into the rest of this stuff, I'm telling you, man, when I get to the end, you guys gonna be like, yo, man, this is crazy. Because I know when the Most High was giving it to me, I was like, man, I cannot believe this. Hold on to your seats. Or like they say, hold on to your horses. I'm gonna read this. Remember I said we have Babylon influencing everybody.
That's right.
Everybody's influencing Babylon, and we are in all these captivities after Babylon. Babylon, even though they're gone by the time the Greeks come on the scene, the Greeks pick up their calendar. And this also hurts the Greeks when they tried to force this onto the Israelites. And a revolution happened during the Hasmonean dynasty where we had a Renaissance period and we were trying to restore that which was lost. And this is where you get the book of Jubilees, the book of Enoch. These things came about during the Renaissance period and the Hasmonean dynasty where the Israelites had took the yoke of the Grecian captivity off of them and they wanted to restore that which was lost. That's why you see a lot of reckoning in regards to the stars and the sun in the book of Jubilees and the book of Enoch. They were trying to restore something that was lost based on oral tradition. And now we can look retrospectively and see all of the data and be able to assign it appropriately so we can create a model with information that they themselves did not have full access to. So a lot of stuff that I'm showing you, it probably was known in oral tradition, but it was never codified, so that way they can go back over and look at it and fully restore what was lost. A lot of stuff came handed down by oral traditions. This is why we see 364 days. This is why we see the importance of the sun, marking times, dates, seasons, etc. We see the second importance of the moon, or the priority of the moon being lowered, because they said the moon throws off the calendar. Why? Because they was throwing shots at the quote-unquote lunar schemes of the oppressors. This is deep stuff. And if you follow me, when I do part 3, I'm telling you to all come back full circle. Okay, Con?
Take your time.
But this research, I've never seen nobody present it when showing the calendar. I'm just giving you guys my body of research. I didn't just wake up one day, pick a calendar. I went through a couple of them, like I told you guys before in part 1. But this time, I said, let me throw everything away and look at the full garment of research to ensure that whatever conclusion I come to can be tested. And that's the point. When you have a hypothesis, the purpose of you getting facts, observations, patterns is to continuously fact check your hypothesis. And when your hypothesis is solid, then you can create a theory out of that, and then you can present a conclusion. A lot of us don't have that type of methodology, which is academic, so that way we teach stuff that we just hear. People teach us. We never go back and do the inductive research. So I continuously, when I was doing this, I had to go back and keep testing my hypothesis, keep testing and keep testing. I found things that went against it, and I went and researched some more stuff that went towards it. I took the stuff that went against it, tested against my hypothesis. Again, it's almost like a mathematical equation I had to go through when I did this. And then I had to test that on over 20 years to ensure, 20-year calendar years, to ensure that that model fits. If it didn't fit, I can't use it. I gotta go back to the drawing board. And maybe if I do 100 years, it may see some slight modification may be made. But so far, I did about 20, 25 years, and every time it came exact. It worked. Worked. So far, it worked. This I'm saying. The Most High gave the instruction, tell us that we had to prove all things. We had to ensure that we go back and we ensure that the things that we're being taught can actually be tested when people come up against it. So when people ask me, why do you hold that stance or that model in regards to the calendar, I can show them my full body of research and let them see what conclusion that they come to. All right. So let me read this, and then we're going to end off on this and do a part 3. The Grecian calendar influenced by Babylonians. Many of the works of ancient Greek and Hellenistic writers, including mathematicians, astronomers, and geographers, have been preserved up to the present time, or some aspects of their work and thought are still known through later references. However, achievements in these fields by earlier ancient Near Eastern civilizations, notably those in Babylonia, were forgotten for a long time. Since the discovery of key archaeological sites in the 19th century, many cuneiform writings on clay tablets have been found, some of them related to astronomy. Since the rediscovery of Babylonian civilization, it has become apparent that Hellenistic astronomy was strongly influenced by the Chaldeans. The best documented borrowings of this is Hipparchus from 2nd century BCE and Claudius Ptolemy of the 2nd century CE. Many scholars agree that the Metonic cycle, which is a methodology that was integrated into the quote-unquote Macedonian calendar, is likely to have been learned by the Greeks from what? Babylonian scribes. Meton of Athens, a Greek astronomer of the 5th century BCE, developed a lunisolar calendar based on the fact that the 19 solar years is about equal to 235 lunar months, a period relation already known to the Babylonians. In the 4th century, Eusebius of Cnidus wrote a book on the fixed stars. His descriptions of many constellations, especially the 12 signs of the zodiac, are suspiciously similar to Babylonian originals. Babylon is everywhere now. They still have their tentacles from the grave, holding on. They're not letting go. And a lot of us today are still holding on to the same tentacles of Babylon. Okay. This is why this research is very important. The following century, Aristarchus of Samos used an eclipse cycle of Babylonian origin called the Saros cycle to determine the year length, again going back to Babylon. However, all these examples of early influence must be inferred, and the chain of transmission is not known. In 1900, Franz Xaver Kubler demonstrated that Ptolemy had stated in his Almagest 4.2 that Hipparchus improved the values of the moon's periods known to him from even more ancient astronomers by comparing eclipse observations made earlier by the Chaldeans and by himself. Again, the foundation is still Babylon. However, Kluger found that the periods of Ptolemy attributes to Hipparchus had already been used in Babylonian euphemerides, specifically the collection of texts nowadays called System B, sometimes attributed to Kidenu. Apparently, Hipparchus only confirmed the validity of the periods he learned from the Chaldeans by his newer observations. Later Greek knowledge of the specific Babylonian theory is confirmed by 2nd century papyrus, which contains 32 lines of a single column of calculations for the moon using the same System B from Babylon, but written in Greek on papyrus rather than in cuneiform on clay tablets. Grecian calendar that's being used by the Macedonians. What was Alexander the Great?
It was Greek.
No, but what kind of Greek was it?
Macedonian.
He was a Macedonian. So now we see what calendar they're bringing in when they take it over. And after he dies, the Ptolemies and Seleucids are the ones that control the Levant region.
Right.
They're using a calendar influenced by Babylon. And now you're going to see when they start to disrespect the temple and the Israelites rebel against them. They said that they came to change also our Sabbaths and our feast days. That can only be done if there's an imposition of a calendar that's being forced upon the people and they can autonomously have their own identity. Remember, they were trying to restore their calendar when they were in Persian captivity. The Persians let them do whatever they want religiously, culturally. They let them do it. You know what I'm saying? But when the Greeks came on the scene, they wanted to Hellenize everybody. They're going to make you take these customs, this language, this philosophy. You're going to take it. And if you got sacred scripts, you're going to make you translate it so we can understand it. And then we can integrate that into our amalgamated culture. Because we don't have our own indigenous one, so we're going to amalgamate yours. Okay. They may have theirs, but it was very primitive until they started interfacing with the Near East. Because even their calendar was very, small local calendars, but they wanted to create a political calendar and it was based off the Babylonians. Babylonians are still alive, still kicking, still controlling. It is clear that Hipparchus and Ptolemy out there had an essentially complete list of eclipse observations covering many centuries. Most likely, these have been compiled from their diary tablets. These are clay tablets recording all relevant observations that the Chaldeans routinely made. Preserved examples date from 652 BCE to AD 130, but probably the records went back as far as the reign of Babylonian king Nabonassar. Ptolemy starts his chronology with the first day in the Egyptian calendar, the first year of Nabonassar, i.e. 26 February 747 BCE. This raw material by itself must have been tough to use, and no doubt the Chaldeans themselves compiled extracts of, e.g., all observed eclipses. This allowed them to recognize periodic reoccurrences of events. Among others, they used System B. All right, 223 synodic months equals 239 returns, an anomaly, or what's called an anomalistic month, when you see a change. And a change in the consistency of behavior patterns that you see in the heavenly realm is due to eclipses. Eclipses are the anomaly or the change that you see that is not typical. And sometimes it happens at random. It seems like it happens at random, but now we have to be able to determine when eclipses will happen, right? So they're trying to figure out this calendar system, trying to figure out their month, one synodic month, and so forth. The Babylonians expressed all periods in synodic months. Synodic months means what? What is this based off of? The moon, lunation, moon cycles. Probably because they use a lunar solar calendar. Various relations with yearly phenomenon led to different values for the length of the year. Similarly, various relations between the periods of the planets were known. The relations that Ptolemy attributes to Hyrcanus and Alchemist 9.3 had already been used in predictions found on Babylonian clay tablets. So the Greeks was not doing nothing new. They looked at the Babylonians and say, wow, they have a pretty interesting system here. We're going to slightly fine-tune it to meet our needs, which goes to show that they are still a slave to Babylon. Other traces of Babylonian practice and Hyrcanus' work are first Greek known to divide the circle in 360 degrees, blah, blah. All this knowledge was transferred to the Greeks, probably shortly after the conquest by who? Alexander the Great, 331 BCE. According to the late classical philosopher Simplicius of the early 6th century, Alexander ordered the translation of the historical astronomical records under supervision of his chronicler Callisthenes of Olynthus, who sent it to his uncle.
Aristotle.
Say again?
Aristotle.
You've heard of Aristotle before, right?
Yeah.
Thought he was doing something new? They was pulling a lot of stuff from the Babylonians. I'm going to read this and I'm going to end off on there. Yeah, I'm going to end off on there, and then I'll get into the rest of this with y'all another time. But I want y'all to start to see the similarities in the Macedonian calendar with the Babylonian calendar and how this was the calendar that was used by Antiochus when he came into Jerusalem. Are y'all understanding? This is going to be very important, because if y'all don't understand what's going on politically and in regards to the calendrical systems of the oppressors of the Israelites, you're not going to understand why certain changes and things were being done while they were in captivity. You're not going to know what is original to us and what is not. This is why history is important. There's a lot of things we think the system we have today is original, but we've never tested the hypothesis. Okay. All right, so let me go back and end off on the last slide, which will be this one right here. The ancient Macedonian calendar. The ancient Macedonian calendar is a lunisolar calendar. It's almost a summary of what I read before. That was in use in ancient Macedon and the first one in BCE. It consisted of 12 synodic lunar months, 354 days per year, which needed intercalary months to stay in step with the seasons. By the time the calendar was being used across the Hellenistic world, 7 total embolimoi, or intercalary months, were added in each 19th year Metonic cycle. So the intercalary months was added every 19-year Metonic cycle. The names of the ancient Macedonian calendar remained in use in Syria even into the Christian era. The Macedonian calendar was in essence the Babylonian calendar with the substitution of Macedonian names for the Babylonian ones. An example of the 6th century inscriptions from Decapolis, Jordan, bearing the solar Macedonian calendar starts from the month Ordinius. The solar type was merged later with the Julian calendar, which we're going to get into when I do part 3. And Roman Macedonia, both calendars were used. The Roman one is attested inscriptions with the name Calandon Gen, Calende, and the Macedonian Hellenike dot. Helen. Finally, an inscription from Cassadrea of about 306 to 298 BC, bearing a month, Athenion, suggests that some cities may have known their own months even after the 4th century Macedonian expansion. Under the Seleucid Empire, that was the empire that was responsible during the Maccabean revolt period, right? The Macedonians adopted the Seleucid era, the year beginning on the 1st of Dios, during what we call October 312 BCE was declared to be the year 1 of the Seleucid era. We're going to go into that one, do part 2. So let me just sum up what I read with you guys so far, and then I'm going to finish part 3 whenever I'm giving another Shabbat to teach this. But thus so far, no, matter of fact, before I even sum it up, I want y'all to tell me what y'all learned from today. Let me see if you're following. So from what y'all learned from today, anybody, and if y'all don't participate, I'm start calling people. So help out those who don't want to be called on. Tell me what you learned so far, so I can make sure you're following. This is a lot of heavy stuff, but it's good stuff. Yes.
Well, basically, everything started with Babylon. They're the one changed everything. Then everyone else took the culture of Babylon and applied it to their calendar.
There you go.
And even up right now today, that's why y'all is saying, come out of Babylon.
Don't take my prophetic message at the end. But thank you, Elder. That was great. Anybody else? I know y'all learned something today. Anybody else? Somebody else? Anybody? Yes,
know,
go ahead, Frank.
we do know that Abraham was from Ur. He was from the Chaldeans.
Right.
He lived
So
there.
he taught them something.
Or he may have learned something from them
Or he
too.
may have, that's what I was wrong. Or he may have learned something.
It's called acculturation.
There was an exchange.
Exactly.
So that's why,
Exactly.
and we already know that there are some principles that still apply.
Exactly.
Meaning that Satan never tells you a complete lie.
There you go.
He will mix it with truth.
Exactly.
So maybe that's why, and now I'm just speculating,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe that's why whatever that exchange was gave the Babylonians some type, that's what gave them that power, because it's still like a tentacle.
Yeah.
I'm making up a word.
That's cool.
It's
It's
spreading
cool.
out today
Uh-huh.
because we know that the Roman Catholicism is the actual religion that's being practiced, is the Babylonian religion. They're one and the same. And now with that in mind, now we see where the confusion comes with Israel.
And see
In
now,
every captivity,
uh-huh.
you're taking on
There
all
you
the
go.
practices.
There
Like
you
you
go.
said, you showed us in scripture, the laity, it wasn't their job to figure out
and wait.
which day.
And look, and the punishment when the Most High was sending the prophets, who were they going to first? The priesthood. The priests. The priest was doing the wickedness. The priest was defiling the temple. The priest was not telling people to let the land rest. The priests were going hard after the spiritual systems of the other entities the Most High told them not to do. And if the king and the priests are going astray, you could be damn well sure that the people are going to follow suit.
That's right.
Because the people don't want to ask, put a king over us. Give us a king. They ask for it. But sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for.
So it's really nothing new.
Nothing new.
Satan is using the same game.
There you go. And look, I didn't create, again, what I'm showing you guys is my research to my conclusion. I'm not doing this to offend anybody. I'm not doing this to tell somebody you're wrong, whatever you're doing. What I'm saying is, let's go back and see where this stuff comes from. And once we see where it comes from, let's reevaluate where we stand today. Because I know a lot of people, when I did part one, didn't know half of the information. And even more so, don't even know this information I brought out here. How many of you know about the full moon reckoning in regards to the 3-day plague of darkness before the month period started 2 chapters later? See, a lot of people didn't even know that. I didn't notice that, so I had to look further. So wait, hold on a second. Let me see this thing, because the moon is dark. If it's darkness, who cares? It's not going to be a big deal.
Right.
It's not going to be no sign. But if the full moon is dark for 3 days, okay, now we got a problem. Now it's scary now. Something wrong. Sometimes you have cloud cover for like a day or maybe even 2, but 3 days was significant because you typically didn't have a lot of cloud cover for 3 full days to hide the full moon, especially if you're using the moon to depict time. That was very sacred. That threw them off. Same thing with the sun, darkness. You didn't even know if it was day or night. Okay. So to sum everything up, I started off showing you full moon reckoning that was used in the pre-exilic period. I showed y'all when we go to 1 Kings chapter 6, 1 Kings chapter 8, we see the word Yerak there, and we see the word Chodesh intertwined, which means that the reckoning of the lunar cycles is in connection with the renewing cycle at some point. And we're going to see later when I give you my model how I arrange that. It's very interesting, right? Similar to somebody else that teaches here. I ain't going to say their name. Similar. But there was more data that I want to give to substantiate what it is that we stand on. So people don't think that I just pulled this out the sky. Some people think somebody just came and taught it to me. I went through this research, and just to let you know, I did this by myself. And that's not saying I'm special. It's like, you know, I labored night and day, crying tears, losing sleep. Didn't really cry in tears, but metaphorically speaking. And put this research together to say, man, I hope somebody appreciates this, because it's the first time I've ever seen it put down like this. But I think that this is important because it will help with the unification process, because it will force all of us to go back to an academic methodological approach to ascertaining our conclusions. Because if I was to present my stance on the calendar to academia and was to write a paper on it, this is the type of methodology that I have to use.
That's right.
I can't just sum something up. I can't say, well, my uncle taught me this or this congregation taught me that. No, where's your references?
Right.
Where's your source citations? What's your methodology? Are you doing inductively or doing deductively? Have you tested your hypothesis? Have you applied or tried to implement it and see the result that you get? I have to give them all of this data. I'm just trying to teach y'all the same thing. King, Khan? Yes.
Testing your hypothesis. You said you used 20 years?
Yes, 20 random years.
40 years.
I'll do 40 years for y'all. This will be fun.
I'm saying 40. I'm thinking just off the top of my head that Israel was in the wilderness for 40 years.
Exactly.
So they were given a calendar, and then they went into the promised land 40 years after. So why not a nice number like 40?
That's great. So when I give y'all the model, you could do it and come back and let me know what happens in 40 years, right? But that's good. I like that. See, now we got people thinking in here. We got people thinking. That's all I'm trying to do, inspire critical thought. So again, let me sum it up. So now we looked at the full moon reckoning in pre-exilic Israel. We looked at the Giza calendar, used the word Yerat, that has to do with the lunar reckoning in regards to month or time. We also have a situation where we have the 3 days of darkness. I mentioned that. We use the rainy season to know what season it is, because if we didn't have a calendar, a clock, a watch, and we were trying to determine what season it was, we'd have to look at the sun, the moon, the stars. We had to look at the crops or the different plant life, because you know plants, what happens to the plants during the fall time? What happened to the plants during the fall time, the trees in the fall time? Leaves fall off, right? Okay, and then we have a situation where they start budding again, so we can use that. And crops, certain fruits are in season in certain times of the year. Certain plants that is edible is only there in certain times of the year. Then we have bird migrations. We have birds that are flying in during the springtime and birds that are flying out in the fall when it gets cool. We have the mating season that normally happens in the springtime, and then we have a situation with the rainy season in Israel that occur between a specific fixed period of time. So now, if you was a pastoralist or a layman and you was in Israel, you would look at all of these things to know what time it is. Somebody said, you know what time it is. Yeah, I know. I'm looking at the sun, moon, stars. I'm looking at the crops, the plants. I'm looking at the animals, and I'm looking at the weather. So they didn't have to have all this mathematical formulations, and all they had to do was look at nature. When's the last time we used nature to determine what time it was? Most High gave you all the tools you need so you can autonomously determine time and do so collectively, because the real solution for this calendar, now I'm gonna get into it towards the end, is when we get in that wilderness wandering period, we all seeing the same things every day of every month of every year. We ain't gonna be arguing because we're all together. But when you scatter, internet is here, all the information is popping up, of course everybody's gonna go out their own way. But when we're together being persecuted, we're gonna have to use these natural tools to determine time, because we will be disconnected from the society, but we still have to keep this time and use our tradition of the feasts and festivals as an ethnic marker. So when people see us, they can identify who we are. Because even in this land, we cannot keep all the statutes for the feasts and festivals exactly, but it's an ethnic marker that makes you distinct from your neighbor who's a Goyim or Gentile. It also is a reminder what the Most High did to your ancestors, and it also points to our redemption in the future. Everything in regards to what the Most High was trying to teach Israel, the reason why he gave them these feasts and festival days is to remember him. Remember him. Remember what he did, remember what he is doing today, and remember what he will do in the future. And that is what these things are for. It's a reminder to empower us that the Most High is still with us. Okay? And when we see that Babylon, when we went into Babylon, we sat, we got fat, we got material possessions, we got political offices, we got into the military. We adopted their entire system. And we took that residue when we went back to rebuild the land, and we even started calling the names of the months after our oppressor. And we still have people that use them today. I'm not saying they're wrong or they're evil or anything. I'm just saying you got to ask somebody, hey, is that indigenous Israelite? Where did we get those names of those months from? And why are we still using it? Are we really trying to go back to the pre-exilic independent sovereign status that we once had so we could be in full alignment with what Torah is teaching us? Or are we going to take that and mingle that with the things of Babylon? What are we going to do? Because when you're still connected to Babylon, when the judges come, it's going to hit you. But when you try to distance yourself and do what the Most High has ordained, he will preserve you in the midst of those destructions and those punishments. And we're going to see that towards the end. And again, the Greeks borrow from that. And what this is leading up to is going to be the Maccabean revolt. And then you're going to see all these calendrical changes that's attempted by the Israelites to restore things based on oral tradition, because now they don't have any overlords over them. Now the Hasmonean dynasty lasted almost 100 years. We were fully independent, and we partnered up with the neighboring entity that was in control at that time. So now we have a Renaissance period where we can start to write things again, where anybody controlling what we can write. And by controlling what calendar we can adopt and which calendar we didn't. This is when we start to see the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, all these different groups. And then we have groups that are working in the temple, groups that are living by the caves. To the people by the caves, they're gonna have a different method of reckoning time than the people that's working in the temple. Okay, interesting. You gotta understand this. If you don't understand that, the calendar system is not gonna make any sense. We gotta see where these traditions came from. And I wanna go through all of that with you. I'm gonna go through the historians, Philo, Josephus. I'm gonna go through the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm gonna go through everything so you guys can see where stuff comes from, all the way up until we get kicked out the land, until we get the Hillel, Rabbi Hillel II. Have you ever heard of Rabbi Hillel II? He was a person responsible for creating the quote-unquote intercalation calendar that the Jews use today. And he created a mathematical formula in regards to the solar years, the astronomical cycles, etc. So that way you don't need a Sahedrin to determine the time. But now when the Israelites went back into the land in what year? 1940 what? 1948. Now you're reestablishing a state, not a country, not a nation, a state. You gotta understand what that word means. Legally, politically, that's very important. And then now we are reinstituting something there that Most High did not ordain. Some people said Most High ordained this. You know, you have those Christians who say, you know, we have to bless the Jews and take care of the Jews and make sure they get to the land. And, you know, they say that's the Zionist Christians, right? They want all the Israel, who they consider Israel, to go back to the land. And now what happens is they're using a mathematical formula to establish their calendar system that was not indigenous to the ancient Israelites of the text. So we have an obligation, because we consider ourselves the people from the text, to restore what was lost, to be a light unto even those Gentiles.
Come on now.
And I'm attempting to do this with this work, and I'm sharing it to you guys. So if you guys do want to subscribe to it, you will have the data necessary to promote that. And with that being said, I'm gonna end off on this. I want to thank you all for coming out and seeing part 2. I kind of figured it may have been part 3. It's a lot of information, but I guarantee when I'm done with part 3, it will blow your mind. Okay? All right. All right. With that, I'm gonna hand it back over to Minister Carnes, and I'm sorry for taking up too much time, but I hope this stuff will be useful for you guys in your studies. Con?
Hallelujah.
I want everybody to stand up. You've been sitting for a while, and I'm gonna give you the opportunity to shake some of that Babylon off of you, right? Can I get Brother Frank and another elder?